Chapter 1254. It was no wonder that Chen Yuanyuan was sad. She had been fought over by several men in her life, and had experienced too many hardships. She had thought that her daughter was already a princess now, and would be able to live a luxurious life from a young age without repeating her mistakes. Who would have thought that she did not repeat her mistakes but suffered in a completely opposite way? Chen Yuanyuan had too many men and Ku did not have a man. Whether it was with Fu Kangon or Kangxi, they all died. Now that there was a good ending, who knew that Zhao Go did not have the ability to be a husband? But even if Zhao Go could not have sex, he was still the emperor. Since Ku had become an imperial concubine, she would not be able to find another man in this life. The mother and daughter hugged and cried for a while. Chen Yuanyuan had experienced too much and quickly sobered up. She looked at her daughter and said, "Is that why you went to ask about Song Qingshu?" "Of course not." Aku buried her head in her arms shyly. Song Qingshu, who was on the beam, felt his mouth go dry. He thought that there were countless men in the world who coveted the softness of Chen Yuanyuan's chest. Only Aku did not feel bad when she hugged her. "I just thought of how he looked down on me and felt very uncomfortable. I wanted to find out more about him so that I could take revenge in the future." Aku buried her head in Chen Yuanyuan's arms and said in a muffled voice. Li Yuanji, who was on the beam, could not help but laugh happily when she heard her words. She poked the man beside her and said, "Brother Song, did you abandon her after you slept with her?" Song Qingshu shook his head. He only felt strange. When did he offend her? And make her hate him so much? Fortunately, Chen Yuanyuan also had the same doubt. "Did that Song Qingshu do something to you?" She had a deep impression of Song Qingshu. Back in the Three Holy Nunnery, he had discussed Buddhism with her and had the air of an enlightened monk. However, she did not have a good impression of Song Qingshu, mainly because he had said that there would be no problem bringing Aku to the capital. Who knew that Aku would lose her freedom as soon as she entered Yanjing City. Later, she was even used as a hostage to threaten Wu Sangui. All of this made her feel like she had been cheated. It would be strange if she had a good impression of him. "He didn't do anything to me." Knowing his mother's worry, Aku hurriedly explained, "But in Yanjing City, Kangxi did not dare to take me into the harem, as he said, but who knew Kangxi would give me to him?" "Ah!" Chen Yuanyuan exclaimed. "At that time, I thought he was glib-tongued and frivolous. So this was what he was planning." Li Yuanji, who was on the beam, poked Song Qingshu's waist. Her eyes were full of smiles. Glib, frivolous little pervert, Song Qingshu was speechless. He could only continue to listen to what the people below were saying. "Mother, you misunderstood him," Aku hurriedly said. "He didn't plan to do anything to me. When Kangxi gave me to him, he refused without hesitation." "He refused?" Chen Yuanyuan said in surprise. "Yes." Aku bit her lip. "I was very indignant. I hate everything related to him. So you went to make things difficult for Miss Li." Chen Yuanyuan finally understood the whole story. At the same time, Li Yuanji, who was on the beam, also suddenly realized that she had been implicated by Song Qingshu. "Mother, do you think I'm so annoying? No matter what, I'm a dignified princess. I'm not bad-looking. Why did he refuse me without even thinking about it?" Li Yuanji deeply agreed with Aku's words. She thought, "Not only are you not bad-looking, you can even make the fish and beasts fall from the sky. If I were a man, I would definitely not be able to refuse. In the end, I'm afraid it's your father's reputation that dragged you down." Seeing her daughter's puzzled eyes, Chen Yuanyuan thought that this girl was even more stupid than she was when she was young. She was afraid that there would be many disasters in the future. She could only patiently explain, "In fact, Song Qingshu has already told you the reason." "When did he tell me?" Aku asked curiously. "Have you forgotten why he was so sure that Kangxi wouldn't marry you when he was in the Sanqing nunnery?" Chen Yuanyuan sighed faintly. In the end, the reason he refused you was exactly the same as the reason Kangxi refused you. Aku exclaimed. Kangxi wanted to buy people's hearts. Could it be that he also? Chen Yuanyuan nodded. In the past, I always thought that he was just a greedy and lustful playboy. It seems that I underestimated him. Combined with his achievements over the years, he had the ambition and plan to fight for the Central Plains as early as that time. His foresight is really admirable. Aku was immediately dissatisfied. Mother, you're still speaking for him. Chen Yuanyuan smiled. I'm just telling the truth. Now that I think about it, it would have been great if he had agreed to Kangxi's betrothal. I'm afraid he would have been the best choice for you. Aku's pretty face instantly turned red. Bah, if mother likes him, I'll marry him myself. Naughty girl, you even dare to make fun of your mother. Chen Yuanyuan's face turned slightly red, and a delicate redness seeped out of her smooth and white skin, as if smeared on white jade. She was stunned. The mother and daughter played for a while. Aku suddenly asked, By the way, mother, why did you stop me just now? You're not related to Li Yuanji at all. Chen Yuanyuan sighed. Miss Li turned from a proud daughter of heaven to the daughter of a sinner overnight. She fell from the sky to the ground. It's already pitiful enough. Why do you have to make things difficult for her? What's more, it was us who caused her to fall to this point. Li Yuanji was originally very touched, but when she heard the last sentence, she couldn't help but be stunned. She thought to herself, what does what happened to me have to do with her? Even Song Qinshu didn't know what was going on. He gestured for them to keep quiet and continued to listen. Mother, this is all Minister Han's plan, Aku hurriedly comforted. That's true, but after all, we participated in it. Chen Yuanyuan sighed. If you had told me earlier that Zhao Go and you were in name but not in reality, I wouldn't have helped you fight for the title of queen by framing an innocent person. Mother, did you forget the task that father gave us? Aku said. If we want to take down Machi Chu and Jia Sherdao, we should start with Li Yuanji. Unfortunately, Jia Sherdao has a strong foundation. Although his power has been greatly reduced, his foundation hasn't been harmed. Hearing the two women's discussion, Song Qinshu suddenly understood. Back then, all the evidence pointed to Jia Fei killing Li Yuanji because of jealousy. He felt that something was wrong, but he didn't expect the two of them to be the culprits. Brother Song, I have a favor to ask of you. Li Yuanji's cold voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Tell me. As long as I can do it, I won't refuse. Song Qinshu smiled bitterly. He didn't expect Li Yuanji to find out the truth so coincidentally. She had suffered so much because of that incident. Now that the culprit was in front of her, how could she let it go? Chapter 1255. To borrow a popular saying from the previous world, when Song Qinshu heard Li Yuanji's words, he almost spat out a mouthful of salt soda to death. Although with Song Qinshu's current level of cultivation, he could even hear the sound of a mosquito landing on the ground clearly, he still asked again with some uncertainty, What did you just say? I said I want you to help me destroy their chastity. Li Yuanji bit her lip and said expressionlessly. Finally getting confirmation, Song Qinshu suddenly found that he didn't know how to respond. Li Yuanji obviously also knew that such a request was a bit shocking, so she explained in a cold voice, So they are the culprits. Fortunately, I met you that time. If I met another man, my chastity would have been gone, and it goes without saying how miserable the consequences would be. They destroyed my chastity, so I just gave them a tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and let them experience what it feels like. Song Qinshu suddenly became silent. He knew that what Li Yuanji said was the truth. If he hadn't taken care of her, he was afraid that she would have been reduced to a situation like purgatory by now. It was completely understandable that she wanted to take revenge, but to do it in such a way, yes. He also admitted that this kind of revenge was indeed very erotic. Whether it was Chen Yuanyuan or Aku, they were both femme fatale. Most men in the world would be willing to shorten their lifespan by 10 years just to get close to either of them, let alone both of them together. Coupled with their identity as mother and daughter, it added a taboo excitement and temptation. In the face of such temptation, any man would be tempted, and naturally, Song Qingshu was no exception. But being tempted was one thing, and acting was another. He never thought of himself as a gentleman, but he was also not an unprincipled beast. Seeing that he had been silent, Liu Enji bit her lip. Okay, if you don't want to help, then I will do it myself. Song Qingshu was stunned. He thought to himself, you are a woman, how can you do it yourself? While he was stunned, Liu Enji broke away from his embrace and leaped towards the bed. Who is it? Chen Yuanyuan was fine, but Aku was a martial artist after all. When she heard the sound of clothes fluttering in the air, she subconsciously sat up. She only saw a shadow flash, and before she could see anything clearly, she fainted. Aku? Come. Only then did Chen Yuanyuan react, but just as she finished speaking, her vision went black, and she didn't know what happened. Brother Song, I knew you would help me. Liu Enji giggled as she looked at the man on the bed. Song Qingshu withdrew his finger that had struck the sleeping acupoints of the mother and daughter, and he couldn't help but laugh bitterly without end. The reason he'd struck the acupoints of Aku and Chen Yuanyuan before Liu Enji was because he knew that if they were to meet face to face with Liu Enji, then the aftermath would be even more troublesome. I only sealed their acupoints. I didn't say that I would help you do such a thing, Song Qingshu said in a deep voice. Liu Enji blinked as she looked at him, her eyes full of pleading. Song Qingshu's heart almost softened, but he quickly steeled his will. Even if you look at me like that, I won't help you do such a thing. Seeing that acting coquettishly didn't work, Liu Enji's eyes rolled, and the corner of her mouth slightly rose, revealing a trace of a sweet smile. As expected of the man this lady likes. Congratulations, Brother Song, you've passed the test. Song Qingshu finally reacted. After all this time, she was actually tricking him. It seems that even after thousands of years, these little tricks of women will not change. Song Qingshu couldn't help but think of those women's tricks that were circulating on the internet in his previous life. They would often pretend to be another woman on QQ or WeChat to seduce their boyfriend, and test whether the boyfriend would do something wrong to them. Song Qingshu had never thought that he would encounter such a thing after transmigrating. Alright, don't be angry. Liu Enji hugged his hand and acted coquettishly, her voice sweeter than honey. At worst, I'll compensate you. Song Qingshu was startled. How will you compensate me? Liu Enji tiptoed and whispered in his ear. Did you forget why we're here? Song Qingshu couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. He glanced at the soft and comfortable bed next to him, only to feel a little dry in his throat. You really want to on this bed? Liu Enji had already taken off her shoes and sat on the bed, a pair of big eyes full of charm. Brother Song, don't you dare? Who said I don't dare? Although he knew that she was provoking him, Song Qingshu was still a little angry. Then come up. Liu Enji was clearly just a young girl, but at this moment, the charm that she revealed at this moment was no less than that of the top courtesans in Qinhuai River, causing Song Qingshu to be a little dazed. But they're still on the bed. Song Qingshu somewhat unnaturally pointed at the mother and daughter Chen Yuanyuan and Aku, who were unconscious on the side. Liu Enji waved her hand indifferently. I don't mind. What do you mind? Song Qingshu thought about it and agreed that if he continued to make excuses, it would seem unreasonable. Moreover, he was in a dilemma just now, and after holding it in for so long, it was already extremely uncomfortable. Now that he was invited by his lover, how could he be polite? The air was filled with an extremely tempting sweet fragrance. Song Qingshu had long been unable to distinguish the fragrance from Liu Enji's body, Aku's or Chen Yuanyuan's. How does she take care of herself? Song Qingshu teased. She lives like a princess in the Fu every day, unlike a wild girl like you, running around in the Jianghu all day long. It's normal that you can't compare to them in the wind and sun. The 6 armies mourn in mourning, rushing to the crown in anger for a beauty. It's not shameful to not be compared to the world's #1 beauty. Li Yuanji snorted, her mood surprisingly good. At this time, how could she not know Chen Yuanyuan's true identity? Looking at the energetic young girl in front of him, Song Qingshu only felt his heart filled with love. This was what made her so cute, always so mischievous, sunny, and optimistic. The reason why he didn't agree to her method of revenge was largely because he didn't want such a cute young girl's precious and pure heart to be distorted by hatred. Hey, what are you doing? Song Qingshu suddenly found that Li Yuanji's hands were groping Chen Yuanyuan and Aku, mother and daughter, and couldn't help asking. Taking off their clothes. Li Yuanji replied as if it was a matter of course. Song Qingshu only felt his nose heat up and almost had a nosebleed. He hurriedly shouted, "Don't mess around." "I'm not messing around." Li Yuanji pouted, feeling wronged. "I was so badly hurt by them. It's fine if you don't help me take revenge, but now that I'm taking revenge myself, you're still scolding me." Looking at the young girl's tearful appearance, Song Qingshu felt a burst of guilt in his heart. Okay, it's Brother Song's fault, but is taking off their clothes your way of revenge? Li Yuanji smiled through her tears. You'll know in a moment. Song Qingshu's face darkened. You're not still thinking about that, are you? Don't worry, I won't let you be a beast. Li Yuanji seemed to have guessed what he was thinking and giggled. Seeing that Chen Yuanyuan and Aku's clothes were getting less and less, and soon they were only left with the most intimate underwear, Song Qingshu couldn't help but turn his head. Hey, it's fine if you want to take revenge on them, but now I'm next to you. After all, there's a difference between men and women. If I seethe, it'll be improper. Li Yuanji moved closer to his ear and said in a sweet voice, Brother Song, you're lying again. I clearly felt that your body was even more excited just now. See how I deal with you. Song Qingshu flew into a rage out of humiliation and decided to punish this disobedient young girl. Li Yuanji smiled sweetly and completely relaxed her body, using endless gentleness to calm the man's anger. At a certain critical moment, Li Yuanji suddenly exclaimed, Wait a minute, then she twisted her waist and shrank her whole body into the quilt. Song Qingshu's expression suddenly became extremely strange. There was a bit of pity, but more of a sense of conquest. Chapter 1256. Chen Yuanyuan, who was in a deep sleep, made a sound. She frowned slightly as if she was aware of what had happened. Song Qingshu never expected that Li Yuanji would do such a thing. He couldn't help but be shocked and angry. What are you doing? Taking revenge on them, Li Yuanji replied as if it was a matter of course. At the same time, she tore Aku's pants and spat out the residue on her palm. Then she smeared it on her thigh. Enough! Song Qingshu's eyelids twitched, and he hurriedly pulled her back. What's wrong, are you angry? Li Yuanji moved closer to him and rubbed his shoulder with her body. She had a conspiratorial smile on her face. Song Qingshu snorted coldly. He glanced at Chen Yuanyuan's delicate red lips, which seemed to exude a layer of moist luster. Under the candlelight, his heart couldn't help but beat wildly. He hurriedly turned his face. They caused me to lose my chastity. Originally, I wanted to give them a taste of losing their chastity as well, but Brother Song, you are a gentleman and refused to help me, so I had no choice but to use this method. Looking at her masterpiece on the bed, Li Yuanji raised her chin. The slightly upturned corners of her mouth showed that she was extremely proud of herself. Although I can't really destroy their chastity, it's good to use this method to scare them. When I think about how they will be scared and suspicious when they wake up, I am especially happy. When I think about how long these days will last, I am even happier. Song Qingshu was speechless. It turned out that Li Yuanji was just lying to him when she said that she had given up on revenge. Seducing him to bed was also part of the revenge plan. This girl, she was really a little demon girl. Well, you have taken revenge, even if you don't want to. Now you should be satisfied, right? Song Qinshu picked up the clothes scattered on the side and threw them to her. Hurry up and put them on. We should go. Chun Yuan and Aku were lying on the bed. Their hair was disheveled and their clothes were ragged, revealing their ivory skin. They looked like crabapples that had been blown away by a storm, but this had a strange kind of temptation. Song Qinshu was worried that if he continued to stay here, he might do something impulsive, so he hurriedly pulled Li Yuanji away. Look at how scared you are. Are you still the famous Golden Snake King? Li Yuanji curled her lips, but she still obediently began to put on her clothes. While putting on her clothes, she said with a smile, Brother Song, why are you so overreacting? You are the one who has the most advantage. Song Qinshu almost fell to the ground. He said angrily, What advantage did I get? To let the number one beauty in the world swallow her. Well, who knows how many men in this world would be willing to have their lives shortened by 10 years. Li Yuanji's almond-shaped eyes seemed to be shining as she revealed a teasing expression. Ahem, Song Qinshu was incomparably embarrassed. Your behavior will be regarded as a pervert or a pervert in my hometown. It's getting late, let's go. Wait. Halfway through, Li Yuanji suddenly turned around and ran to the side of the bed. Song Qinshu was worried that she would really do something, so he hurriedly ran over and asked in a low voice, What else do you want? I have to disguise myself a little more. Li Yuanji answered with a smile. Then she used her hands and feet to pinch and scratch Chun Yuan and Aku's bodies. Although their sleeping acupuncture point had been hit, the sleeping Chun Yuan and Aku could still feel everything. Their throats subconsciously let out bursts of painful groans. Song Qinshu's eyelids twitched as he watched. He was about to stop her, but he thought that if he didn't let this little witch vent her anger, she might come up with some other dirty tricks in the future. After hesitating for a moment, he let her do as she pleased. In any case, she had a good sense of propriety. Although the mother and daughter's skin was bruised, they were all superficial wounds. They would be fine after a few days of rest, and there wouldn't be any sequelae. Song Qinshu could only think to himself, speaking of which, it was you who harmed Li Yuanji first. In this world, it goes without saying how important a woman's chastity is. Compared to Li Yuanji losing her chastity, the revenge they received is nothing. It's done. Li Yuanji clapped her hands and looked down at her work with a very satisfied expression. Looking at Chun Yuan and Aku lying on the bed, as if they had been abused, Song Qinshu couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. This scene reminded him of Empress Pei Man in the imperial palace of the Jin kingdom. She had also disguised the two princesses of the kingdom of Song as if they had been abused by the Prince of Wei. However, this scene was obviously more visually impactful. Brother Song, let's go. Now that Li Yuanji had gotten her revenge, all the negative emotions she had been suppressing during this period were swept away. In an instant, she was back to the bright and beautiful girl she used to be. It's better to let it out than to block it. This is good. Song Qinshu smiled and put his arm around her slender waist. Soon, the two of them disappeared into the night outside the window. Not long after they left, Aku and Chun Yuan woke up one after another. First, Song Qinshu didn't use too much internal energy to seal their acupoints. Second, the pain caused by Li Yuanji's pinching had, to a certain extent, caused them to wake up much earlier. What happened? Aku sat up in a daze. Because her skin was as smooth as silk, the blanket naturally slid off her body. Feeling the chill in the air, she only realized that her clothes were disheveled and subconsciously exclaimed, "What's wrong?" Chun Yuan, who was beside her, sat up as well. She kept rubbing her forehead. All she felt was that her entire body was in terrible pain. Because she had just woken up, she was still a little dazed. When she sat up, she subconsciously swallowed her saliva. Gulp, Chun Yuan had a strange expression on her face. She felt as if she had swallowed something. She hurriedly touched it with her hand and just happened to feel the residue at the corner of her lip. She brought it to the tip of her nose and sniffed it. That strange yet familiar smell almost made her faint. As someone who had been through it, how could she not know what it was? When she thought about how she had accidentally swallowed so much, she felt nauseous in her chest and stomach. She hurriedly lay to the side and retched. Unfortunately, after retching for half a day, she only managed to spit out some water and nothing else. "Mother, what's wrong?" Aku was startled and hurriedly patted her back in an attempt to make her feel better. "Water, I want water." Chen Yuanyuan's white, jade-like cheeks seemed to be smeared with a layer of bright red rouge. It was hard to tell if she was anxious or embarrassed. "Your Highness, what happened?" At this time, the palace maids outside the hall also heard Aku's cry when she woke up and hurriedly ran in. As soon as the palace maids came in, they saw the mother and daughter. One's face was like a peach blossom and the other's hair was messy. In addition, the two's clothes were extremely messy. They couldn't help but stare at them. They all thought to themselves, are they playing that kind of game? They are mother and daughter in such a large palace. Apart from the guards, there was only one man, the emperor. There were only a few dozen people who received the emperor's favor. The remaining thousands of palace maids were lonely in the depths of the palace. It was hard to guarantee that they would seek some support. Some palace maids sought out eunuchs to eat with each other. Although they couldn't do anything, at least they could live together and eat together. To a certain extent, they could feel the warmth of a family. However, in the past dynasties, the behavior of eating with each other was strictly forbidden. Once it was discovered, the punishment was extremely severe. Thus, some palace maids would seek out other palace maids and play some games with each other. Sometimes, the imperial concubines in the harem would even fool around with the palace maid. These were all tacit secret. To be able to survive in the palace, each of them was a shrewd person. They knew that a loose tongue could cause trouble. Thus, when they saw the messy state of the bed, they all lowered their head. "Quickly go and pour a cup of water for my mother," Aku said hurriedly. "Don't!" Chen Yuanyuan hurriedly stopped him. "There's nothing else. You can leave first." "Mother?" Aku looked at her in puzzlement. "We'll talk later," Chen Yuanyuan said in a low voice. "Yes." The palace maids hurriedly retreated. "Wait!" Chen Yuanyuan suddenly thought of something. "Did anyone come in just now?" The palace maids looked at each other, and then the leader answered, "We've been guarding outside. No one came in." Chen Yuanyuan was secretly shocked, but she didn't show it on her face. She waved her hand and said, "I know. Then you can leave first." After the palace maids closed the door, Aku finally couldn't help but be puzzled. "Mother, why did you send them away?" Chen Yuanyuan smiled bitterly. "What happened today is too unbelievable. If the slightest news leaked out, we mother and daughter would be killed." After all, she had experienced too many storms in her life. After the initial panic, she quickly realized the risk. Once those palace maids came in and saw something or smelled something, what happened to them could no longer be hidden. With Li Yuanji as an example, she knew that if the harem's imperial concubines lost their innocence, what kind of tragic fate awaited them. As Chen Yuanyuan spoke, she only felt that her mouth was full of that smell. She couldn't help but frown. She hurriedly said to her daughter, "Go and pour me a cup of water first." "Okay." Aku wrapped a piece of clothing around her body. She got up and was about to bring her water. Suddenly, she fell back on the bed with a cry. Her face was full of pain. "What's wrong?" Chen Yuanyuan hurriedly went to help her up. "My leg hurts so much." Aku frowned. If a man were to see this, he would probably be heartbroken by her pitiful appearance. Chen Yuanyuan's expression changed drastically. She hurriedly lifted her daughter's clothes to take a look. She saw bruises on her fair and tender thighs. What was even more shocking was that there was a sticky patch on the inside of Aku's thighs. The familiar smell made Chen Yuanyuan's heart sink. What are these things? After all, Aku was a young girl who had not experienced the ways of the world. In addition, this world wasn't as well informed as the future. She didn't even realize the seriousness of the matter. Instead, she stretched out her finger and brought it to the tip of her nose to smell it. A strange and palpitating smell wafted over, causing her to be stunned. "Stop smelling it!" Chen Yuanyuan pulled her hand away, and a charming blush appeared on her face. She said, "This is dirty stuff." The voting on the public account had ended. In the end, Li Qiushui, Li Qingluo, Wang Yuyan/Li Qinglu became the most popular choice with 26% of the vote. However, Monk was curious as to whether they had the advantage in numbers. Chen Yuanyuan, Aku followed closely behind with 15% of the vote. It seemed that this pair of beautiful mother and daughter were well liked by many gentlemen. Chapter 1257. What kind of dirty stuff is that? Aku didn't understand and even brought it to his nose to smell it curiously. I told you not to smell it. Seeing her daughter's silly behavior, Chen Yuanyuan was angry and anxious. She quickly grabbed her daughter's hand and whispered in her ear, "This is a man's thing, ah." Aku immediately moved her hand away from her nose, as if she was scalded. "Don't shout." Chen Yuanyuan quickly covered her daughter's mouth. Wu Aku's peach blossom eyes widened. She waved her hands as if she was extremely anxious. She mumbled, "Your hand is full of that smell." Chen Yuanyuan was shocked. She then remembered that she had just vomited something onto her palm to check. She quickly let go of her hand and Aku quickly wiped her mouth with her sleeve. "Aku, don't blame mother. The main thing is that no one can know what happened today. Otherwise, you won't have a place in the inner palace." Seeing her daughter's uncomfortable expression, Chen Yuanyuan quickly comforted. Aku gradually understood what had happened to her body. Her pretty face became extremely pale. My daughter's chastity was taken away just like that? She thought of how she had once proudly declared that her future husband would be an unparalleled hero who could stabilize the country with literature and martial arts. Although she was now married to a eunuch emperor, she still carefully protected the beautiful and dazzling dream in her heart. But now, she had become a broken flower. Even if such an unparalleled hero really appeared, how could she be worthy of him? Aku felt completely disheartened when the thing she had carefully protected was broken. She cried out loud. Chen Yuanyuan sighed inwardly. Wasn't I also insulted? However, she had experienced too many things in the past few decades. In this aspect, she was much more accepting than her daughter. She hurriedly put away the sorrow in her heart and kept comforting her daughter. After crying for a while, Aku suddenly sat up straight. Her voice was as cold as ice. "I must find that person and cut him into pieces." Chen Yuanyuan was so angry that her whole body was trembling. She thought to herself, "It's not just you. I can't wait to tear that person into pieces. But this kind of thing can't be investigated openly. Naturally, I can't use the power of the imperial concubine. Finding out who did it is probably more difficult than ascending to heaven." Suddenly, Chen Yuanyuan's eyes lit up as if she had thought of something. She hurriedly lifted the quilt to look at her daughter's thigh. "Mother, what are you doing?" Aku was embarrassed and anxious. Even though they were both women, she still felt shy in such a private place. Chen Yuanyuan took a few glances and searched the bedsheets again. Suddenly, a hint of joy appeared on her face. "There's no blood, no blood. Mother, what are you talking about?" Aku covered his legs with the quilt again, embarrassed to the extreme. "I said you didn't bleed." Seeing her daughter's confused face, Chen Yuanyuan hurriedly explained, "What I meant was that you didn't lose your innocence." Although Aku was ignorant in this aspect, he was not a child after all. He more or less knew a little. Hearing his mother's words, he could not help but be pleasantly surprised. "Really?" Chen Yuanyuan wasn't sure either. She pulled her aside and asked a few more questions. "Does it hurt?" "It hurts." Aku rubbed his thigh. "My whole body hurts." Chen Yuanyuan rolled her eyes at her. I'm asking you, does it hurt? Aku blushed and said timidly, I don't know. Chen Yuanyuan hurriedly said, get up and try walking. Aku nodded and hastily put on her dress. After getting out of bed, she took a deep breath and kept praying in her heart. Then, she tentatively took a step forward. Her pretty face suddenly showed a strange expression. How is it? Chen Yuanyuan asked eagerly. Aku didn't answer. Instead, she continued to walk a few steps. At first, she walked tentatively, but later, she walked as usual. In the end, she even jumped with joy. Mother, it doesn't hurt at all. It turns out that I didn't lose my innocence. Keep your voice down. Chen Yuanyuan hurriedly ran over and covered her daughter's mouth. Then, she was stunned. Only then did she realize that there was no strange feeling between her legs. This discovery surprised and delighted her. After all, she had provoked too many men in her life, and felt that she had caused too many sins. Later, she moved out of Ping Shi Huang's mansion and cultivated in the Three Sage Nunnery. It could be said that she had kept her chastity for all these years. Naturally, she didn't want her cultivation to be ruined by others. This dramatic turn of events caused the mother and daughter to cry tears of joy. They hugged each other excitedly for a long time before they finally calmed down. Mother, do you think that person is a pervert? He did such a thing, but he didn't really offend us. After the excitement passed, Aku suddenly spoke. In fact, she should be rejoicing, but she still didn't dare to believe it. With their beauty, how could there be a man in this world who could endure it? He is indeed a pervert. Thinking of the thing she had accidentally swallowed when she woke up, a faint blush appeared on Chen Yuanyuan's beautiful face. At the same time, she couldn't understand why it was like this. Who is that person? Aku seemed to be asking, but also seemed to be muttering to herself. Do you think it's the emperor? Chen Yuanyuan said tentatively. In her opinion, that person could have easily obtained their bodies, but in the end, he didn't do it. She was also very confident in her own charm. Just she alone could make all men fall under her skirt. Moreover, there was a daughter who was no less beautiful than her by her side. There was no man in this world who could resist such temptation, unless he wasn't a man. To be able to come and go as he pleased in this imperial palace, and to make all the palace maids afraid to speak the truth, Chen Yuanyuan could only think of Zhao Guo. Although Zhao Guo didn't need to be so sneaky to enter Aku's palace, she was also sleeping here today. Chen Yuanyuan had experienced so many twists and turns in her life. Adding on the fact that she had been born in a brothel, she had an unparalleled grasp of men's psychology. Naturally, she knew the dirty thoughts in men's hearts that couldn't be told to others. She and Aku were so beautiful, and they were mother and daughter. It was normal for Zhao Guo to have evil thoughts. However, while he was the ruler of a country, this kind of thing was offensive to public morals. If it was leaked, he would most likely be impeached by the entire court. It would leave a stain in the history books. Also, the Southern Song dynasty was in an alliance with Wu Sangui. If this matter reached Wu Sangui's ears and he flew into a rage for a beauty, then the consequences would be severe. Especially when he only took advantage of the two but didn't do anything. The more Chen Yuanyuan thought about it, the more she felt that Zhao Guo was the most suspicious. A hint of anger floated onto her beautiful face. It shouldn't be him. Aku shook her head and said with a red face, if he could make that kind of thing again, he wouldn't be extinct. Chen Yuanyuan instantly understood. She thought she was really muddle-headed. If Zhao Guo could really make that kind of thing, even if he couldn't have sex, the people in the imperial hospital would have a way to impregnate the imperial concubines in the back palace. Why would they find two members of the imperial family to be the heir apparent? But if it wasn't him, who else could it be in this imperial palace? Chen Yuanyuan said in puzzlement. Maybe it's some martial arts master. Aku knew martial arts after all. She instinctively thought of the flying thieves in Jianghu. Chen Yuanyuan shook her head. The security in the imperial palace is tight. The back palace is the most important place. If it was so easy for the martial arts masters in Jianghu to come and go as they please, this imperial palace would have become a market long ago. You've been attacking for so long, have you heard of any martial arts masters breaking in? Never. Aku answered instinctively. But she still didn't give up. Normal martial arts masters can't come in, but what about those top martial arts masters? She had once wandered the Jianghu for a period of time. She always had an inexplicable sense of respect for those legendary martial arts masters. Which one of the imperial guards in the imperial palace isn't a top martial arts master? Also, Chen Yuan said vaguely. Then she continued, unless that person's martial arts are the best in the world, how could they come and go without a trace? But if their martial arts are really that high, which one of them isn't an elder of great virtue and age? Why would they do such a despicable and lowly thing? Chen Yuan said. No matter who he is, I must find this person and tear him to pieces. Aku clenched her fists and secretly swore. Not long after Song Qingshu left with Li Yuanji, he suddenly had a thought and stopped in his track. Li Yuanji was still in the excitement of getting her revenge. She only realized something was wrong when he stopped. Just as she was about to open her mouth to ask, Song Qingshu covered her mouth and gestured for her to keep quiet. With such high martial arts, you must be famous in Jianghu. Why would you do such a shameful thing like stealing a beauty? An old voice came from behind. Although each word wasn't loud, each word was like a huge bell ringing in her heart. It made her feel dizzy and uncomfortable. She quietly stretched her head out to look behind her. She suddenly opened her mouth in surprise. She saw a person wearing a black cloak. Only his lips and chin were exposed. His back was facing the moon as he slowly descended from the sky. Is he a person or a ghost? This kind of appearance in the middle of the night made Li Yuanji's hair stand on end. Song Qingshu didn't turn his head and didn't use his original figure. Instead, he said in a strange tone, to be able to cultivate the 9-yin manual to such an unimaginable level, could you be Huang Chang? He had also cultivated the 9-yin manual. He knew that among the experts of the present age, other than Wang Chongyang, the only other person who could cultivate the 9-yin manual to such a level was the original author, Huang Chang. He had seen Wang Chongyang before, so it went without saying who this person was. Although there were rumors in Jianghu that Huang Chang had passed away, Song Qingshu had learned from the yellow-robed woman that Huang Chang was still alive in this world. Chapter 1258. Song Qingshu was also speechless. He could not help but sigh in his heart. Always standing by the river, one's shoes would get wet. No wonder he had never heard of any martial arts masters stirring up trouble in the southern Song Palace. It turned out that there was such a big boss hidden in the palace. When Chu Lingfeng entered the palace to steal precious calligraphy and paintings, he was caught and killed by Shi Yanming when he fled to Ox Village. Huang Yaoshi thought that if he had not broken Chu Lingfeng's leg, he would not have died. Now that he thought about it, Chu Lingfeng was not worthy of Huang Chang's attention. Otherwise, he would not even have the chance to leave the palace. The 9-yin manual had attracted the entire martial arts world. The Eastern heretic, the Western poison, the Southern emperor, and the Northern beggar fought for it for 7 days and 7 nights on Mount Hua. Even a master of this level regarded it as a treasure. It could be seen how profound the 9-yin manual was. Although Song Qingshu had mastered the 9-yin manual, he was not naive enough to think that Huang Chang's martial arts could only be reflected by the 9-yin manual. Just like Dugu Qiubai's martial arts were not only equal to the 9 strategies beyond the swords, the internal strength of the snake gallbladder, the heavy sword, and a big eagle. Not to mention that Huang Chang had written the 9-yin manual several decades ago. Who knew what kind of new martial arts he had comprehended, and what realm he had reached in the past few years? Song Qingshu suddenly felt a little depressed. Back then, Hong Qigong and Zhou Batong cheated in the palace. When Ouyang Feng and the others came to find the Book of Wumu, why did they not see Huang Chang? Why did he hit a lightning bolt as soon as he arrived? After thinking about it, Song Qingshu could only understand that Hong Qigong and the others only appeared at the edge of the palace, such as the imperial kitchen. Huang Chang did not care about them, unlike him who ran into the emperor's harem and finally alarmed the old man. I didn't expect that after so many years, someone in Jianghu still remembers me. The man in the black cloak looked up at the moon as if recalling something of the past. But perhaps because the cloak was too big or for some other reason, even under the moonlight, his face was still blurred. It is inevitable for young people to make mistakes. As long as you know to repent, you can still be saved. Put down the imperial concubines and stay in the palace to copy the Taoist canon for 10 years. I can guarantee that no one will blame you for what you did tonight. 10 years? Song Qingshu chuckled. Compared to copying books, I prefer the outside world. Trespassing into the palace and kidnapping an imperial concubine is a crime worthy of 9 familial extermination. Young man, don't be so stubborn. Huang Chang let out a soft sigh. The surrounding flowers and trees seemed to feel his emotions and rustled. Soon, a feeling of regret spread through the air. Song Qingshu's expression was solemn. It was obvious that Song Qingshu had almost reached the realm of the oneness of heaven and man. His every move was one with nature, and his cultivation was even higher than Wang Chongyang's. However, once Wang Chongyang used the Big Dipper formation, he would be able to exert several times more power. It was hard to say what would happen if the two of them fought. Make your move. Since you are from the younger generation, I will let you have 3 moves first. Huang Chang's tone revealed absolute confidence. Are you serious, senior? The corners of Song Qingshu's mouth curled up slightly, as if he already had a card up his sleeve. Of course I wouldn't lie to a junior like you, Huang Chang replied indifferently. Then I thank you, senior. Song Qingshu grinned. He kicked off the ground and disappeared into the night sky with Li Yuanji in his arms. Seeing the scene before him, Huang Chang was startled and didn't know how to react. Though he appeared relaxed, he didn't let his guard down. This young man's martial arts were not weaker than anyone he had seen in his life. In fact, he couldn't even see through Ling Xian. However, a grandmaster had the demeanor of a grandmaster. As a senior, he couldn't make the first move. He was willing to let Ling Xian have 3 moves first. Originally, he was on guard and waiting for Ling Xian's earth-shattering attack. He didn't expect Ling Xian to just run away. Normally, all powerful cultivators had their own pride. Unless they had no other choice, they wouldn't run away. This person's cultivation was unfathomable, but he didn't play by the rules. After all these years of cultivation, Huang Chang had become calm and collected. However, seeing the scene before him, he became angry for the first time. His body flashed and he chased after Ling Xian. However, after chasing for the time it took for an incense stick to burn, not only did he not catch up, the distance between them grew further and further. Finally, Ling Xian disappeared without a trace. Huang Chang couldn't help but stop and give up on the chase. He muttered to himself, "There's such a shocking qigong in this world? It seems that I haven't been involved in worldly affairs for too long. If there's a chance, I'll find Ying Luo and ask her if there are any powerful youths in Jianghu." Returning to the cold palace, Song Qingshu put Li Yuanji down. He let out a sigh of relief and said, "I've finally lost him." Who was that person? Though Li Yuanji was half a person of Jianghu, a legendary figure like Huang Chang was too far away from her. Thus, she didn't know who he was. The author of the 9-yin manual, a super-powerful expert, Song Qingshu replied. Li Yuanji's small mouth was wide open. Although she could not even be considered a third-rate martial artist in Jianghu, she had heard of the 9-yin manual. She rolled her eyes and giggled as she moved closer to Song Qingshu. "Song Dage, is he more powerful than you?" It's the first time I've seen you run in such a mess. Song Qingshu smiled slightly and didn't take her words seriously. After all, I'm here for serious business this time. If it gets out of hand, it won't be easy to clean up. What's more, he's the master of a friend of mine. He's so old. If something happens to him, won't my friend fight me to the death? Li Yuanji snorted with a faint smile. Brother Song, that friend of yours must be a woman, right? And she must be very beautiful. The beautiful and frosty face of the yellow-dressed woman appeared in his mind. Song Qingshu smiled awkwardly and didn't answer. Instead, he changed the topic. Pack up your things. I'll take you out. Unexpectedly, Li Yuanji shook her head. No, I'll stay in this cold palace. You can pick me up when you leave Linnan. Why? Song Qingshu was stunned. If I don't stay here, how can I enjoy the frightened expressions of Wu Fei and her daughter? Li Yuanji said with a smile. Song Qingshu never thought it would be this reason, but it was also in line with her quirky character. Li Yuanji continued to add, besides, if I suddenly disappear from the palace and you happen to be in Linnan, it's hard to guarantee that no one will suspect you. At that time, Wu Fei and her daughter will also know who molested them tonight. Song Qingshu thought to himself, it's obviously you who molested them, okay? However, he also understood that Li Yuanji's worry was not unreasonable. Knowing that she was thinking about him, he couldn't help but feel moved. But what if someone comes to give you white silk again? Li Yuanji snorted. I was just caught off guard before. Now that I'm prepared, how can I fall into such a passive situation? Don't worry. I used to wander in Jianghu, and nothing happened. Song Qingshu complained in his heart. Indeed, nothing happened. It was just that he was later caught by Zhang Zhaozhong. Well, you put this thing away. If you encounter danger, release the signal, and then I will immediately come to save you. Song Qingshu took out a bamboo tube from his arms and handed it to her. It was made by the Golden Snake Camp for transmitting signals on the battlefield, similar to fireworks. Brother Song, you are so kind to me. Li Yuanji wrapped a wisp of fragrance and threw herself into his arms, passionately offering a sweet kiss. After a long time, Li Yuanji blushed and pushed him away. She glanced at the changes in his body and hurriedly looked away. It's almost dawn. If you don't leave now, it will be too late. Song Qingshu laughed and couldn't help but pinch her face. Little devil, you also have a time when you are afraid? Li Yuanji said, I'm still a little girl. How can I stand you? Go, go. As she said this, she pressed his back and pushed him out. Then you be careful. Song Qingshu kissed her and quickly disappeared into the night sky. Li Yuanji stood in front of the window, dazed for a moment. Song Qingshu returned to the inn. After a night of torment, his body was a bit tired, so he fell asleep. Early the next morning, Han Xingzhou sent someone to deliver a message. First, he apologized for not being able to come in person. After all, this was a critical period. If he came to meet, it would be hard to avoid being talked about. He also told him that he had already communicated with Zhao Guo. However, the specific details still needed the opinions of the civil and military officials in court. Finally, he told him that there would be officials from the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies coming to explain some etiquette and things to pay attention to when meeting the emperor tomorrow. After Han Xingzhou's envoy left, it didn't take long for the officials from the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies to come. They listened to all kinds of red tape, and Song Qingshu's ears grew calluses. He used the excuse that he hadn't eaten yet to order a large table of food and wine. He pulled the officials from the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies over to eat and explain. Not long after, they got them drunk. The subordinates of the officials from the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies could only send them to the guest rooms to rest. To avoid being bombarded, Song Qingshu also used the excuse that he was tipsy to return to his own room and pretend to sleep. Because he hadn't slept for long last night and was woken up in the morning, he was really a bit tired. He had been pretending to sleep, but in the end, he really fell asleep. He didn't know how long he slept. Song Qingshu suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze moved to the window. He saw that the sky outside was already dark. However, this wasn't the reason he woke up. Someone actually sent an assassin to deal with me now? Song Qingshu chuckled, his tone full of ridicule. Not long after, an inconspicuous window paper was pierced and a copper pipe was inserted. Song Qingshu snorted coldly and flicked his finger. The copper pipe seemed to be hit by a huge force and was suddenly inserted back. Ah! A scream came from outside. Apparently, the copper pipe had pierced through the throat. Song Qingshu extended his hand and made a suction force in the air. The copper pipe immediately flew into his hand. As for the person outside, because the copper pipe was suddenly pulled out, an arrow of blood splattered on the window, and then there was no more sound. I'm curious, what kind of poison are you planning to use to deal with me? Song Qingshu opened the copper pipe and looked at the powder inside. His face instantly darkened. Chapter 1259. How could he forget this thing? It had tormented him to the point where he had nowhere to go, and was even chased like a dog by Machi Chen and Li Kushio's subordinate. Golden ripple flower. Song Qingshu's voice was cold. Someone actually used the golden ripple flower to deal with him. After inspecting the assassin outside the window and not finding any clues about his identity, Song Qingshu frowned. Who wants to deal with me? Could it be Machi Chen? After all, the golden ripple flower was very rare. He only knew that Ling Tusi and the Machi family had it. Although he and Ling Tusi had a feud before, that was many years ago. Moreover, the other party was far away in Jiangling, so the probability of him committing a crime was not high. Now, in Lin'an City, the most suspicious person was Machi Chen. Even though he was 70% confident, Song Qingshu still didn't dare to let his guard down. At this critical moment, if there were enemies lurking in the dark and he didn't know about it, then it would be terrible. I have to confirm who it is. With a thought, Song Qingshu had an idea. He took out a spare set of clothes and put it on the assassin's corpse. He moved it to the bed and lay face down, pretending to be poisoned and in great pain before he died. Then, he hid himself on the beam. As expected, in less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the door was pushed open. Several black-clothed men carefully approached the bed and stabbed the body of the person on the bed a few times. Only when they were sure that the person was dead did they heave a sigh of relief. It is said that the Golden Snake King's martial arts are unparalleled, but I don't think so. I guess it's because the golden ripple flower is poisonous enough. Even the most powerful expert would die. That's right, why don't I see Chen-san? A few of them started discussing. Because they were afraid of the golden ripple flower's poison, they did not dare to get too close to the corpse. In addition, the corpse was wearing Song Qingshu's clothes. Because of their preconceived notions, they did not realize that the corpse on the bed was their companion, Chen-san. Maybe he ran back to claim credit after seeing that he succeeded. Dongzi, quickly send a signal to young master. A man in black said to a tall and skinny companion. All right, the one called Dongzi ran out happily. Song Qingshu, who was on the roof beam, had a strange look on his face. Chen-san, Dongzi. The rest of the people couldn't be called Gao, Yi, Zhaozhen or something like that, right? He really missed his previous world. He didn't know if that novel had an ending. Hearing footsteps coming from outside the door, Song Qingshu hurriedly put away his random thoughts and looked down. He saw a handsome man walking in, but the gloomy expression on his face ruined his overall appearance. I was wondering who it was. Turns out it was that cripple Wan Gui. Song Qingshu sneered in his heart. Looking at the bitter expression on his face, he must have had a hard time these days. Are you sure he's dead? Seeing the person lying on the bed, Wan Gui hesitated for a moment at the door, his body trembling imperceptibly. It was clear that although he hated Song Qingshu to the extreme, He was also extremely afraid of him at the same time. "Don't worry, young master, we've checked many times." One of the men in black was afraid that Wan Gui didn't believe him, so he picked up a knife and casually stabbed the corpse on the bed a few times. "Be careful, the golden ripple flower is highly toxic. Don't let the blood spill and hurt young master," his companion hurriedly reminded. "No worries." Seeing Song Qing-shu lying there like a dead dog, Wan Gui felt as though a huge rock that was pressing down on his heart had finally been lifted, and in his excitement, he started to chuckle. Since the last time he was crippled by Song Qing-shu in the mansion, he crazily wanted to take revenge. Unfortunately, the other party was elusive. When he heard the news that the other party had led an army to attack Yangzhou, not to mention him, even the emperor couldn't touch the other party. He originally thought that there was no hope for revenge in this lifetime, who knew that Song Qing-shu would actually come to Lin, and didn't bring any guards with him, only a few of Han Xingzhou's subordinates. How could Wan Gui bear it anymore? He immediately gathered the mansion's experts and charged over to the inn. Fortunately, he hadn't lost his reason. He knew that Song Qingshu's martial arts were powerful, so he didn't dare to be forceful. So, he first let the confidants of the Chamberlain of Dependencies continuously urge him to drink. After he was drunk, he sent a quick-witted person with the golden ripple flower to take the lead and only rushed over after confirming that he had succeeded. "You guys go out first." Looking at the corpse on the bed, Wan Gui did his best to suppress the excitement in his body. His handsome face became extremely distorted. Yes. Seeing his expression, the men in black only felt extremely disgusted. They thought to themselves that their young master was actually so interested in corpses, and that the other party was a man. The more they thought about it, the more disgusted they felt. They hurriedly slipped out and closed the door. "Song, you didn't think that you would have such a day, did you?" Without anyone else by his side, Wan Gui could no longer suppress the emotions in his heart, and laughed somewhat crazily. "Back then when you brought Chi Fong over, you were so arrogant, but now aren't you still lying on the bed like a dead dog?" Thinking of some things that happened that day, Wan Gui's handsome face twisted again. He picked up a knife and chopped at the lower body of the corpse on the bed until it was badly mutilated. Then he threw away the knife and gnashed his teeth, saying, "You made me unable to be a man. I won't let this hatred go so easily. I heard that you have a devastatingly beautiful wife and many other beauties. I won't let a single one of them go. I'll make them be ridden by thousands of men and oppressed by tens of thousands of men. I'll make you wear countless green hats in hell." Just as he was talking excitedly, who knew that a cold voice suddenly came to his ear. "I'm afraid you won't have that chance." Song Qingshu originally wanted to listen and see if he could obtain any information from Wan Gui's mouth. But after listening for a while, he discovered that Wan Gui only had hatred left. Adding on the fact that he actually had thoughts about his own woman, how could he endure it? You. Hearing that familiar voice, all the hairs on Wan Gui's body stood up. When he saw that Song Qingshu was safe and sound in front of him, he was even more scared out of his wits, unable to say a single word. "Speak, weren't you quite proud just now? Why aren't you speaking now?" Song Qingshu coldly looked at him. "Why aren't you dead?" Wan Gui cried out in fear, his voice as sharp as a eunuch's. Originally, he was extremely afraid that the fact that he wasn't a man would be known by others. So normally he would intentionally conceal his gradually changing voice. But now that he was scared out of his wits, how could he care about such things? "You haven't died, how could I bear to die?" Song Qingshu lightly replied. "Then who is on the bed?" Wan Gui was both shocked and angry. At the same time, he cursed his subordinates half to death, thinking that if he could escape with his life today, when he returned, he would castrate all of them and make them eunuchs. "That unlucky subordinate of yours called Qin San." Song Qingshu smiled faintly. But in Wan Gui's eyes, This smile was 100 times more terrifying than the devil himself. Young master! At this time, Wan Gui's subordinates outside heard the commotion and rushed in. When they saw that Song Qinshu was standing in the room, they were all dumbfounded. "What are you standing there for? Kill him for me!" Wan Gui also knew how laughable his words were. Although these subordinates were experts carefully selected from the Prime Minister's residence, compared to Song Qinshu, they were still far too lacking. He didn't hope that these people would be able to injure him. He only hoped that they would be able to entangle him, giving him enough time to escape. So as soon as he finished speaking, he used all his strength to smash through the window, trying to escape to the main street and see if he could use the complicated terrain to throw off his opponent. But unfortunately, just as he was about to hit the window, he felt a sharp pain in his leg. His entire body was like a heavy sandbag as he fell to the ground. Horrified, he crawled around and found that Song Qinshu was standing behind him, quietly looking at him. He then looked at his subordinates, only to see that they were all lying on the ground, no longer alive. He actually killed so many experts in an instant without a sound. Wan Gui was shocked and even a bit envious. If he had such a high level of martial arts, he wouldn't have to rely on crafty plots and schemes every time. Your subordinates have already gone to the Yellow Springs to scout for you. Now it's your turn. Song Qinshu hadn't killed him last time because he felt that it would be too easy to kill him. Now that he had suffered for so long, it was about time. Song Qinshu's words instantly pulled Wan Gui back to reality. He felt his entire body go limp. Originally, he had thought that if he couldn't be a man, he would be better off dead. It had always been the conviction of revenge that kept him going, but now that he was truly facing death, he suddenly realized how afraid he was. Thinking of how he was the Prime Minister's grandson, even if he couldn't enjoy the things between a man and a woman, there were still many other things he could enjoy. The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. Wan Gui hurriedly said, "Don't kill me, no, you don't dare to kill me." Song Qinshu laughed lightly. "I don't dare to kill you?" Wan Gui had now somewhat calmed down. "That's right, I am the grandson of the Prime Minister of the Song dynasty. This time, you have come to propose marriage. If you kill me, it will be a public slap to the face of the entire court. At that time, how could the Emperor marry the princess to you?" It was precisely because he had heard this news that he was both jealous and angry. Unable to restrain himself, he had planned this assassination the day before the official court meeting. Seeing that Song Qinshu had sunk into silence, Wan Gui felt that he had grasped his pulse. He grew bolder. "Haha, if you really kill me, at that time, not only will you not be able to propose marriage, you won't even be able to keep your Golden Snake Battalion. My grandfather is the current Prime Minister. At that time, in order to avenge me, he will use all his power to have the court send troops north. Your Golden Snake Battalion can just wait for death. Unless you also kill my grandfather, haha, but my grandfather is the head of all the officials. If he dies at your hands, at that time the entire country will be shocked. Even if the Emperor is unwilling, he will have no choice but to send troops to punish you. The result will be the same." Wan Gui said a long string of things in succession. Seeing that Song Qinshu still didn't refute him, the corners of Wan Gui's mouth rose slightly. He thought to himself that no matter how high the martial arts of these Jianghu people were, they were just people who couldn't be seen in public. How could they compare to these people in court? Shaking his clothes, Wan Gui laughed mischievously. "If there is nothing else, I will leave first." Chapter 1260. Looking at the head rolling on the ground, Song Qinshu said indifferently, "You overestimate your position." The reason why he hadn't killed Wan Gui before was that it would be too easy to kill him directly. It would be better to let him receive more punishment. Secondly, the time was not ripe. Song Qinshu didn't want to give the southern Song dynasty an excuse to send troops at the critical moment of the decisive battle with Li Keqiu. Now that the situation had been settled, there was no need to worry so much. No matter how much Wan Gui was favored by Machi Suo, he was just a concubine's son. How could he affect the political decisions of the imperial court? Even if he was a legitimate son, it didn't matter. In any case, Machi Suo couldn't even protect herself. Originally, Song Qingshu had heard him speak so viciously. Thinking of Di Yun's revenge, he planned to sell Wan Gui to the rabbit house to serve Uncle He. Wan Gui's soft skin and tender flesh made him look like a pretty boy would definitely be a red card. But that scene was too disgusting. Song Qingshu also thought of leaving an enemy full of resentment and adept at scheming. Who knew if he would come back for revenge? Given Song Qingshu's cultivation, he certainly wasn't afraid of him. But there were so many beauties around him that he couldn't risk them. Perhaps it was because he had watched too many movies and TV dramas in his previous life that villains often died because they talked too much. He couldn't repeat the same mistake. Brother Di, I have avenged you. Thinking of the simple and honest Di Yun, Song Qingshu couldn't help but sigh deeply. Don't worry, Machi Suo will soon come to the underground to apologize to you. After sending out a signal, the Golden Snake Camp's subordinates lurking in Lin and City came. Song Qingshu ordered, send this man's bones to Xiangxi Ma Shi Pu and give them to a woman named Qi Fang. Let her bury the bones in front of Di Yun's grave to atone for her crimes. Clean up the others while you're at it. Several Golden Snake Camp's secret agents saluted and said, Yes, my lord. These people were all shrewd and capable people. Soon, these people were cleaned up, even the bloodstains were wiped clean. After this incident, Song Qingshu couldn't sleep anymore, especially when he thought of the person on the bed who had been stabbed to the point of being badly mutilated. He simply sat down on a stool and began to meditate. Around the time of the 5th hour, an official from the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies came to inform him to prepare for the morning court session and enter the palace for an audience. Song Qingshu noticed that one of them, upon seeing that he was safe and sound, had a look of extreme surprise in his eyes. From time to time, he would even look around at something. Knowing that he was Wan Gui's spy, Song Qingshu smiled faintly and didn't think much of it, letting him see. The scene had already been cleaned up. It would be strange if he could really see anything. Compared to this, Song Qingshu was more troubled by another matter. Looking at the dark night sky outside the window, he couldn't help but think to himself, if this time was converted to the time in my previous life, it would be around 3 in the morning, the time when people are sleeping soundly. This morning court system in ancient times is really inhumane. Note: this was the system of the early Ming dynasty. The Song dynasty was not like this. There would not even be a court meeting for a few days. However, for convenience, the Ming system was used. When can I see your emperor? Song Qingshu asked. One of the officials from the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies hurriedly replied, We will first wait outside the palace. The palace gates will open at around 5 in the morning. At that time, someone will arrange for young master to wait in a side hall. When the emperor summons you, a eunuch will lead young master to the throne room. 5 in the morning? Song Qingshu was so angry that he laughed. Wouldn't that be 5 in the morning? He still had to wait 2 hours before entering the palace. After entering the palace, who knew how long he would have to wait for the emperor to summon him? Of course, he wouldn't do it. The officials from the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies immediately became anxious. They tried all sorts of ways to move his emotions and reason, but Song Qingshu remained unmoved. In the end, the group of officials had to beg for mercy. Song Qingshu finally couldn't bear it anymore. Forget it, I won't make things difficult for you people. I'll go ahead. But I can't wait that long. I promise to arrive before the palace gates open. The officials from the office of the Chamberlain of Dependencies had no choice but to compromise. Following this, Song Qingshu rested for another 2 hours before he leisurely walked towards the palace. When he arrived at the palace gates, he discovered that all the civil and military officials were already waiting there. The person at the head of the group was Machi Ruo. However, he seemed to be somewhat preoccupied at this moment. He didn't even notice Song Qingshu's arrival. Beside him was a man with square eyes and a wide nose. His hands were tucked into his sleeves, and his shoulders were hunched. Overall, he looked exceptionally wretched. Although Song Qingshu had never seen him before, from the way he stood, he could guess that he was the right minister, Zhang Junmf. He was also involved in the incident in Yangzhou, and his younger brother, Zhang Ro. Even if it's not for myself, I have to properly settle this debt for Prince Yu. Song Qingshu's expression was grave and stern. An incomparably beautiful face suddenly appeared in his mind. He didn't know where Xiao Longnu was currently. When Machi Ruo found out that she was Yu Fei's orphan, he didn't know if she had encountered any danger. While he was lost in thought, Han Xingzhou beckoned to him and said, "Prince Song, come over here quickly. I'll introduce you to a few people." After all, the title Golden Snake King was a title given by a group of Jianghu people. It wasn't a real king. Normally, Han Xingzhou didn't mind addressing him as Golden Snake King in private to show his respect. But now, with so many people watching and in such an important place like the palace, he naturally didn't want to give himself away. Song Qingshu didn't care about this. He walked over with a smile and said, "Good morning, Minister Han." Han Xingzhou nodded and first introduced Song Qingshu to the crowd. Then, he introduced the surrounding officials to Song Qingshu. Machi Ruo finally came to her senses. With a fake smile, she said, "It seems that Minister Han has a very good relationship with Golden Snake King." Han Xingzhou smiled and said, "If Minister Zhua hadn't interfered when you were in Yangzhou, my relationship with Prince Song would be even better." He had expected that Machi Ruo would start from this aspect, so he simply laid it out. After all, everyone knew that he had reached an agreement with Song Qingshu in Yangzhou. Directly admitting it would make him look open and aboveboard, with a clear conscience, and block the other's series of tricks. Machi Ruo held her breath. Obviously, she didn't expect this. With a cold snort, she turned to Song Qingshu and said, "Yesterday, my grandson heard that young master had arrived in Linen. He came to visit you with gifts, but he hasn't returned yet. Can young master tell me where he has gone?" Song Qingshu cursed inwardly for being shameless. Bringing poison and a group of killers to assassinate him could be described as a visit with gift. Since that was the case, then he would have to face shamelessness with shamelessness. Really? Why haven't I seen your son? Is the security in Lin and so bad that even living people can get lost? Although it was not a big deal to let him know the truth, it was better to avoid trouble. Song Qingshu had always been a person who was afraid of trouble, and he would never hesitate when he could be lazy. "You!" Machi Ruo knew that Wan Gui had most likely been killed by him, but he insisted that he hadn't seen him. She had no evidence, so there was nothing she could do. Okay. The palace gate is open. Everyone, please," Jia Sherdao said. He had been struggling to find Jia Baoyu's whereabouts recently. He found that Machi Ruo had sent troops to the scene, so Jia Baoyu's disappearance must have something to do with him. Seeing that Wan Gui was missing, he was very happy. Song Mao is here to see Jia Sherdao. Song Qingshu was having a headache as he chatted with him. He had to find a proper way to deal with Jia Baoyu's disappearance, or Jia Sherdao would suspect him sooner or later. "Nice to meet you." Jia Sherdao looked at him carefully and found that he couldn't see through him, so he was shocked. A group of people entered the palace, each with their own ulterior motives. The civil and military officials entered the throne room first, while Song Qingshu was led to a side hall by a eunuch to wait. Bored to death waiting in the side hall, Song Qingshu even had the thought of looking for Li Yuanji. However, when he saw the eunuchs following her closely and the guards outside the door, he gave up on the idea. It was too dangerous to be in broad daylight. Fortunately, It didn't take long before news came from the imperial court that he was to have an audience. Song Qingshu straightened his clothes and leisurely made his way towards the throne room. With his experience over the years, he had even sat on the throne. Meeting the emperor of the southern Song dynasty couldn't make him feel nervous. Song Qingshu, the Golden Snake King, is here to see the emperor. After entering the hall, Song Qingshu began to look at the emperor, who had been criticized many times in the future. He was white and chubby, and he actually looked quite cute. Song Qingshu had a strange expression. He thought that it was normal for him to be chubby, since he ate and drank well all day long. Weren't the eunuchs on TV all fat? But it was strange that Zhao Guo's beard was quite lush. The strand of beard under his chin was probably a foot long. Isn't he a useless man? How can he still have such strong testosterone? Don't tell me that mustache was stuck there on purpose. Just as Song Qingshu was cursing in his heart, a loud shout came from the side. How dare you not kneel in front of the emperor? What crime do you deserve? Song Qingshu turned his head around and saw Ma Chi-chu standing there with an indignant look on her face, glaring at him. Zhang Jun, who was standing next to her, chimed in, I really don't know how those people from the Chamberlain of Dependencies have taught them. How can a mere commoner like you call himself a king? You know, this is a great crime. Jia Sherdao had been watching the show from the sidelines, but when Zhang Jun brought the topic to the Chamberlain of Dependencies, he immediately objected. You're wrong, Minister of the Right. Song Qingshu isn't a citizen of the Song dynasty, and he's also a leader. He doesn't need to be bound by the rules of the Song dynasty, no matter if he calls himself king or king. Now that the officials in the Chamberlain of Dependencies were under the control of the Privy Council, if he allowed Zhang Jun to make this crime a reality, he couldn't help but be embarrassed. That was why he spoke up for Song Qingshu. Ma Chi-su laughed coldly and said, You're wrong, Minister Jia. Song Qingshu was born in the Jingzhou area of the Song dynasty. His father is Song Yuanxiao of the Wudong sect. As the saying goes, the ruler is the ruler of his subjects, and the father is the ruler of his children. Even his father, Song Yuanxiao, is a citizen of the Song dynasty, so why isn't he? Jia Sherdao couldn't help but be speechless. He snorted coldly and didn't reply. Since the topic had been shifted away from the Chamberlain of Dependencies, he naturally didn't want to block the arrow for Song Qingshu. Han Xingzhou hurriedly signaled to Song Qingshu, telling him to kneel and shout, Long live the Emperor, long live the Emperor, to give Zhao Guo a way out, and then he could use the opportunity to smooth things over. Chapter 1261. Ma Chi-ta saw Zhao Guo's expression and a ferocious smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She decided to add fuel to the fire. She turned her head and asked a white-bearded official behind her, Master He, if you do not pay your respects to the Emperor, how should you be punished according to the laws of Song? That Master He was an assistant minister of the Ministry of Right. Although the Ministry of Rights of the Song dynasty only existed in name, and the title of assistant minister was just an empty title, he still knew a thing or two about etiquette. The white-bearded official glanced at Jia Sherdao and Han Xianzhou and complained in his heart. These immortals were fighting, and the mortals were suffering. However, all the officials in the court were looking at him, and even the emperor was looking at him. He had to bite the bullet and say, This has committed a crime of disrespect and should be punished with 30 strokes of the cane. In fact, Song Qingshu's behavior had involved disrespect for the emperor, and it was a crime of great disrespect. According to the law, he should be beheaded. However, Master He had been an official for decades, and he wasn't stupid. He wouldn't tell the truth. If Song Qingshu had been an ordinary citizen, he would have been killed. However, Song Qingshu had 200,000 soldiers under his command, and he was the overlord of a region. Moreover, it seemed that he had a close relationship with Jia Sherdao and Han Xianzhou. If Song Qingshu said that Song Qingshu should be executed according to the law, everyone would be embarrassed, and there would be no room for reconciliation. Ma Qifeng frowned and cursed in her heart, this old man is so cunning. He's playing with words. However, she also knew that the emperor wouldn't order Song Qingshu to be beheaded because of this, so she stopped while she was ahead. Master, he is a man of virtue and is familiar with all kinds of etiquette. If Master he says so, then there's no doubt about it. Guards, drag Song Qingshu out and give him 30 strokes of the cane. Zhao Go still didn't say a word, as if he agreed with everything. After all, Ma Qifeng was the prime minister, the head of the officials. The guards outside the palace saw that the emperor didn't object, so they ran in and surrounded Song Qingshu. 2 of them reached out and tried to pull him out, but as soon as their hands touched his body, they were shaken away by an invisible force, and they fell to the ground with their legs in the air. Upon seeing this, not only was Ma Qifeng not angry, she was even elated. She thought to herself, I was waiting for you to act like this. How dare you? How dare you resist? Men, take him down. Han Xuanzhou groaned inwardly. Hastily he stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, Song Qingshu is, after all, a foreign envoy. As the saying goes, when 2 countries are at war, the envoy is not beheaded. If we punish him with caning, it will be a disgrace to your Majesty's sage. Ma Qita sneered at the side and said in a strange tone, Ambassador of a foreign country, may I ask which country and which clan does the one surnamed Song come from? Han Xuanzhou's breath caught in his throat, and he felt extremely angry in his heart. But he knew that his eloquence wasn't as good as Ma Qizhua's, who specialized in crafty plots and schemes, so he didn't know how to refute. I really can't kneel. Song Qingshu, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. His words were earth-shattering. Not only should I not kneel, but your country's emperor should come and greet me. How dare you! Arrogant! Bastard! The throne room was instantly in an uproar, and a group of people started discussing. Zhao Go's face was so dark that it looked like water was about to drip out of it. Han Xuanzhou was even more anxious. He thought that it was just a kneel, and it would be over with a little perfunctory. Was there a need to make things so difficult for everyone? Ma Qizhua glanced at Zhao Go and said with a fake smile, I wonder what wise opinion Prince Song has. Why should the emperor come and greet you? He decided to provoke Zhao Go again. Having worked with Zhao Go for so many years, he knew that Zhao Go's patience was extraordinary. But once he exploded, his anger was unimaginable. Back in the day, he killed someone like Yu Fei just like that. Song Qingshu saw through his sinister intentions with a single glance, but he still didn't care. He said calmly, May I ask if your country is a vassal to the Jin kingdom? As soon as he said this, the previously noisy throne room instantly fell silent. The civil and military officials didn't care about their faces. Some looked ashamed, while others looked angry. Song Qingshu looked at Ma Qizhuo. Lord Ma Qi is the head of the officials. Can you answer Song Mao's doubts? There is such a thing. Ma Qizhuo was with Qin Hui in the past, and could be said to be a firm supporter of surrendering. Their political capital in the imperial court was the peace talks with the Jin kingdom. Thus, he didn't dare to slap his own face and could only admit it. But he immediately changed the topic. But this has nothing to do with today's matter. Don't change the topic. Who said it has nothing to do with today's matter? Song Qingshu said calmly. As far as I know, your country is not only a vassal to the Jin kingdom, but also a country of uncle and nephew. In official letters, your emperor has to call the Jin emperor uncle. When the Jin kingdom's envoy comes to visit, your emperor has to personally greet and receive the edict. Ma Qizhuo peeked at Zhao Go's expression and knew that he was on the verge of exploding. She immediately gloated, thinking, Song, you're going to die this time? Why are you rambling on about so much? Ma Qizhuo had been an official for many years, and she knew the principle of expressing her loyalty and helping her master. Zhao Gou's expression became much better. Song Qingshu smiled. I'm sorry, I have another identity. The minister of the Jin Kingdom, Tang Quobian, is my sworn brother. Coincidentally, Tang Quobian is the brother-in-law of the Jin Kingdom's emperor. According to seniority, I am also the brother of the Jin Kingdom's emperor. Lord Machijua, I'm not very good at etiquette. May I ask how your emperor should address me in this situation? As soon as Song Qingshu said this, the officials were in an uproar. Even Jia Sherdao and Han Xingzhou looked at him in shock. Han Xingzhou wondered why he hadn't mentioned this relationship before. He was planning to conquer the Jin Kingdom in the north. Would Song Qingshu be a hindrance when the time came? Machijua looked like she had eaten **T. How was she supposed to answer such a question? Was she supposed to say that Zhao Gou should call him uncle? If that happened, not just Zhao Gou, but even the officials would drown him in their saliva. Fortunately, he reacted quickly enough. He immediately said, "Humph, who knows if it's true or not? You want us to believe you with a lie? Lord Tang Quobian is second only to the emperor of the Jin Kingdom. Why would he call a Jianghu person like you his brother? Because he was a peacemaker, he had to maintain a good relationship with the Jin Kingdom. When he mentioned Tang Quobian, the number one person in the Jin Kingdom, his tone was respectful. I knew you wouldn't admit it." Song Qingshu took out a jade seal and showed it to everyone. "Look carefully. This is Tang Quobian's personal seal. He gave it to me as a gift to become my sworn brother." Machijua sneered and said, "You just randomly took out a seal and said it was Tang Quobian's seal?" At the same time, she was shocked. She wondered if Song Qingshu had really become sworn brothers with Tang Quobian. However, there was no turning back now. Even if it was true, she could only deny it. After Tang Quobian was appointed as the minister and marshal, he sent a letter of credence to your kingdom. You should have his seal here. Why don't you compare it? Song Qingshu said slowly. He was not in a hurry. Zhao Gou signaled with his eyes, and a eunuch went to retrieve the letter of credence. Seeing Song Qingshu's confidence, Machijua felt a little weak. She hurriedly said, "Even if this is Tang Quobian's seal, it doesn't mean anything. After all, everyone in the Jianghu knows that the Golden Snake King's martial arts are unparalleled. If he wanted to steal a seal, it wouldn't be difficult. Moreover, Tang Quobian was a powerful person. His personal seal was very important. How could he just casually give it away?" Although they knew that Machijua was quibbling, everyone present felt that his words made sense. After all, the seal was a very important thing. It was a symbol of power. Which one of them didn't protect their seal very carefully? Why would they give it away? Song Qingshu was not angry at all. He calmly said, "The princesses of your kingdom also know that I have become sworn brothers with Tang Quobian. For example, Princess Mauda, Princess Chengda, Princess Shund, Princess Ruf. You can ask any one of them to prove it." All of the civil and military officials in the court were speechless. Everyone knew that these empress concubines were previously in the Jin Kingdom's laundry yard and were only saved by Song Qingshu's help. Since he dared to say this, it clearly couldn't be wrong. After all, what happened in the laundry brothel wasn't something to be proud of. Machijua wasn't stupid enough to ask the princesses for proof and reopen their scars. If that happened, he wouldn't be able to bear the anger of those women in the harem. "Your Majesty, we have finished comparing it with the document on file. It is indeed Tang Quobian's personal seal." By this time, the eunuch who had gone to fetch the document had returned. A few officials who were good at appraising had finished comparing the document and gave Machijua another stab. Song Qingshu looked at Machijua with a faint smile and asked, "Lord Machi, do you still have any doubts now?" Machijua almost fainted from anger. She could only say hatefully, "So what? You are a Han, yet you call yourself a brother of the Jin. You even came to our Han kingdom to show off your strength. You have truly forgotten your ancestors. You deserve to be punished. Song Qingshu had to admit that she was an expert at manipulating people's emotions. His words quickly aroused the hatred of the officials in the palace. After all, the Jin kingdom and the southern Song dynasty had a blood feud. Many of them looked at him with disdain. However, he had already expected that revealing Tang Quobian's identity would have such an effect. He continued calmly, "You are wrong. Song Mao has never forgotten that he is a Han. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken such a huge risk to rescue your princess from the Jin kingdom. For this matter, Immortal Zhang of Wudong personally paid a visit and even sent a few of his disciples to assist me. Even he praised me. What right does Lord Machi have to say that I have forgotten my ancestors? Could it be that Lord Machi thinks that you have better foresight than Immortal Zhang?" Machi Cheng was momentarily at a loss for words. One must know that Zhang Sanfeng's reputation among the people was so high that he was like an immortal. Moreover, the kingdom of Song had always revered Taoism. Several of the previous emperors had conferred various honorific titles on Zhang Sanfeng, such as Enlightened Immortal, Concealed Light and Ambition True Immortal, Pure Emptiness and Yuan Miao Immortal, and so on. If she dared to question Zhang Sanfeng, wouldn't she be disrespecting the previous emperors? As for becoming sworn brothers with Tang Quobian, you don't need to read too much into it, Lord Machi. Song Qingshu sneered and said, "Unlike Lord Machi, who is hated by everyone, Song Mao has always been very popular. Not only is he Tang Quobian's sworn brother, but he also has a good relationship with the Ruyang Mansion of Mongolia. He also has a good relationship with Songgodu and Prince Kong of the Qin Kingdom. He also has a good relationship with the first-class Hall of Shixia, the Grand Master of Tubo, and the Duan family of Dali. Of course, there are many of my friends in the Kingdom of Song, such as the princesses, Minister Han, and Jia Shumi. Of course, Lord Machi is an exception." Jia Sherdao was stunned. He thought, what kind of friendship could I possibly have with you? But then he remembered that he had spoken up for Song Qingshu before, and he was afraid that Song Qingshu was returning the favor, so he smiled and acquiesced. Hearing Song Qingshu's description of his connections, all the officials in the court were shocked. Even Zhao Go looked at him in surprise, thinking that even if Song Qingshu was an ordinary citizen, he wouldn't dare to offend him, let alone the fact that Song Qingshu was an overlord with 200,000 troops. Their faces turned pale. They were used to being superior, and they couldn't bring themselves to kneel and salute a young man at this time. Jia Sherdao glared at Han Xingzhou, as if he was blaming him for provoking Machi Su. Now, he had brought trouble upon himself and everyone else. Han Xingzhou was also very depressed. If the emperor was not here, he seemed ready to pounce and tear the other to pieces at any time. All the civil and military officials stared hatefully at the backs of the three heavyweights. They thought to themselves, "You guys are fighting, but we have to suffer because of you guys. Even if we're lying down, we'll still be shot. If you want to embarrass me, then don't think you'll have a good life." Machi Sua's eyes were full of anger as she glanced around. Her eyes fell on Han Xingzhou and Jia Sherdao, and a hideous smile appeared on her face. "Lord Jia, Lord Han, please." Finished speaking, he came in front of Song Qingshu and glared at him venomously. Only then did he lower his eyelids and coldly said, "Minister Zhua Shi and Assistant Minister Wanqi Chun greets, young Master Song. Many thanks to young Master for rescuing the princesses from the abyss of misery." Left Minister and Right Minister were just titles that people used to call them for convenience. In official documents, the title he said was Minister of the Left Servant Shi and Assistant Minister Machi Sa, while the Right Minister was Minister of the Left Servant Shi and Assistant Minister of the Central Secretariat. As if she knew that kneeling was inevitable, Machi Sa didn't hesitate and knelt without hesitation. The Right Minister, Zhang Jun, had always been on his side. Although he was angry, he had no choice but to kneel. When the two leaders knelt, the officials who belonged to their faction also knelt. About 1/3 of the people in the hall knelt, and the other officials who were still standing all looked at Jia Sherdao and Han Xingzhou, asking for their opinion. Suddenly, the two of them were very eye-catching. What? Are Lord Jia and Lord Han unwilling to share the burden of the court, or do you want to disobey the imperial edict? Machi Sua's strange voice suddenly echoed through the hall. Song Qingshu looked on coldly and secretly glanced at Zhao Go, who was sitting on the throne, and saw that he looked very embarrassed. After all, he had been the emperor of the Qing kingdom and the Jin kingdom. Song Qingshu immediately understood what Zhao Go was thinking. It turned out that the officials in the court were clearly divided into 3 factions. The emperor had already given the edict, but the officials still subconsciously asked the leaders of the factions for their opinion. How could he, the emperor, put his face? In the eyes of the emperor, it didn't matter if you were a corrupt official or an honest one, a loyal official or a treacherous one. What he cared about was whether or not you would threaten the imperial power. Obviously, Jia Sherdao and Han Xingzhou made Zhao Go feel this kind of threat. Jia Sherdao and Han Xingzhou also saw Zhao Go's expression, and they were both shocked. They had been in the political arena for many years, and they were very good at figuring out the emperor's thoughts. They quickly came to the same conclusion. Compared to face, the two of them cared more about the emperor's attitude. They had no choice but to kneel and say, "Greetings, Prince Song." In their hearts, they gave the most cordial greetings to Machi Sua's 18 generations of female ancestors. "Greetings, Prince Song." They had all given in, so the officials in the court naturally didn't insist. They all knelt down with their followers, and their voices rang through the entire hall. Looking at the officials in the court kneeling in front of him, including many famous treacherous officials and powerful officials in history, that moment felt so wonderful. Song Qingshu deliberately stayed silent for a moment. After everyone knelt for a while, he said, "Rise. Ahem, everyone, please rise." He was used to being the emperor of the Qing kingdom and the Jin kingdom, and he almost said "rise" by mistake. That would be embarrassing. The officials in the court immediately stood up, and the atmosphere in the hall became very awkward. Zhao Go coughed and broke the silence. "Minister Song, why have you come south despite your busy schedule?" Although Han Xingzhou already knew his purpose through Qi, he still had to go through the necessary procedures. Song Qingshu smiled faintly and answered, "Song Mao has come this time to visit the princesses that we saved last time, and also to propose marriage." Once he said this, the officials in the court immediately began to discuss. After all, only a few people knew the inside story beforehand. In the eyes of the majority, the Golden Snake Camp and the Southern Song's Chun troops were on the river. The situation was extremely tense, and war could break out at any moment. They really didn't expect that he would come to propose marriage at this juncture. Some of the smarter people had already faintly guessed that this was a sign of peace talks, but the majority were still confused. They all looked at Zhao Go, waiting to see what his reaction was. Zhao Go laughed and answered, "Last time, it was thanks to Minister Song's righteous act that the princesses were able to return to their homeland. After they came back, they did not stop praising you in my ears. I can see that many of the princesses have a very good impression of Minister Song. I wonder which princess does Minister Song want to propose marriage to this time?" The princesses that were saved by the Huan Yi brothel were mostly the daughters of Song Huizong, who were Zhao Go's sisters. Zhao Go had always valued filial piety, but his father and brother had always been suffering in the Jin kingdom, and he didn't think of a way to bring them back. He had already received much criticism among the people. Now that he had a chance to show off through these sisters, he naturally was more attentive. "In reply to your majesty, Song Mao wants to propose marriage to Princess Qing De and Princess Rufu." Princess Qing De was Zhao Huer's title, and Princess Rufu was Zhao Yuanyuan's title. Back in the Jin Kingdom Imperial Palace, These two girls had already been intimate with Song Qinshu for Empress Peiman's plan. Though they hadn't reached the final step, they had pretty much done what should and shouldn't have been done. The two girls had given up so much for their love. Song Qinshu naturally didn't want to hurt any of them. So even though he knew that this would be very troublesome, he still said it without hesitation. As the saying went, it was better to betray the world than the beauties. When Song Qinshu said this, the entire hall was like a drop of water falling into a pot of boiling oil. It had to be known that in the past dynasties, it was already a great blessing to be able to marry a princess. Who would dare to be so extravagant as to marry two at the same time? Zhao Guo's brow furrowed, and he subconsciously glared at Han Xingzhou, asking him why he hadn't said this before. Han Xingzhou also groaned inwardly. Previously, when he had chatted with Song Qinshu, he knew that he was asking for marriage, but who would have thought that he planned to marry two princesses? So he hadn't specifically asked about it, and now, such a big mistake had occurred. Machi Rual was already holding back her anger from what had just happened, and when she heard him say this, she took the opportunity to attack. "How dare you? How can there be a reason to marry two princesses at the same time in this world? Song, do you know that your words just now have already committed the crime of great disrespect?" Song Qinshu stared at her coldly. "Machi Rual, please watch your tone. Do you want to kneel again?" Some people in the crowd couldn't help but laugh. It was clear that Machi Rua's previous attempts to make things difficult for Song Qinshu had only ended with her kneeling, and these people couldn't help but laugh. Machi Rua's face was livid, and she was momentarily speechless. Only then did Song Qinshu say, "Song Mao also knows that it is somewhat against the rules to ask for two princesses at the same time." "It's not just against the rules, it's simply nonsense," Han Xingzhou thought exasperatedly. "But our situation is special," Song Qinshu said in a clear voice. "When we were in the Jin Kingdom, we were surrounded by perils, and every step was filled with trepidation. The two princesses and I have experienced too many things together, and we have long since fallen in love with each other. No matter who we abandon, we will hurt the other. So at that time we had already pledged ourselves to marry each other, and promised to live together for the rest of our lives." Chapter 1263. Hearing Ma Qifeng's words, the hall quieted down. Han Xingzhou cursed inwardly. He didn't pay much attention to the affairs of Jianghu, so he didn't know much about Song Qinshu's marriage. He didn't know that Song Qinshu would make so many troubles. First, he said he would marry two princesses. Not only that, but the emperor's tone seemed to have softened. But he had a legitimate wife. In his heart, he wanted to blame Song Qinshu to death. But now that they were all in the same boat, Han Xingzhou had no choice but to bite the bullet and help him out. Although Zhou Zhirua is a sect leader, in the end, she is just a Jianghu woman. How can she be compared to the princess of the great Song? After Prince Song wins the princess, Miss Zhou will naturally give up her position. "Don't worry, Master Machi." Before Machi Feng could say anything, Song Qinshu said, "Zhirua is Song Mao's legitimate wife. She used to be and she will always be." Han Xingzhou almost fainted from anger. He thought Machi Feng didn't know what was good for him. He stood to the side with a livid face and decided not to help him. Machi Ku, on the other hand, was beaming with joy. She thought to herself, "Song Qinshu, oh Song Qinshu, let's see if you will die this time." Soon after, she put on a fake smile and said, "So, Your Excellency is planning to marry these two princesses and make them your concubines?" Song Qinshu didn't seem to know what he meant. He replied indifferently, "So what if they are concubines?" As soon as he said that, there was an uproar in the hall. Han Xingzhou rubbed his eyes, feeling a little dizzy. Jia Sherdao had a faint smile on his face as he watched the show from the side. Zhao Guo's face was livid, and he was on the verge of exploding. Ma Qifeng felt the time was right. She jumped out and scolded, "What an arrogant brat! He wants the princesses to be concubines? This is a blatant disrespect for the royal family. This is outrageous. Song Qinshu said coldly, the Mongolian commandery princess is concubine, and so is the Jin princess. But the Song princess, who is a subject to them, can't be concubine? It wasn't that he was stupid, but that he was deliberately displaying such an arrogant attitude. His goal was still to fight for more benefits in the peace talk. Moreover, as someone from the later generation, he was well aware of the character of the Southern Song dynasty's emperor and ministers. The tougher one's attitude was, the weaker they would be. On the contrary, if one showed weakness, one would just have to wait for them to bare their fangs. Hearing his words, the great hall instantly fell silent. Everyone looked at each other, and even Zhao Guo showed an expression of shock and uncertainty. The news that came out of Song Qingshu's mouth today was more shocking than the last, and it made them somewhat numb. Nonsense. Which Mongolian princess is a concubine? Which Jin princess is a concubine? As the head of all the officials, Ma Chi-chu knew a little about the imperial court of Jin Kingdom and Meng Kingdom. She went through the list of all the princesses and princesses in her mind and confirmed that none of them were married to someone else as a concubine. Instantly, she felt more confident. How could the royal family allow princesses and princesses to be someone else's concubine? Ma Chi-chu sneered inwardly. She decided to use this as an excuse to nail Song Qinshu to death. The princess of the Qi kingdom of the Jin kingdom has been betrothed to me, answered Song Qinshu. The princess of the Qi kingdom? Jia Shidao's expression froze. Is she the sister of the Jin kingdom's emperor Wanyan Ping? Song Qinshu smiled. Yes, it is her. Wanyan Ping is the sister of Tang Quobian's wife. In order to bring us together by marriage, Tang Quobian deliberately played the matchmaker. All the princesses of your kingdom know about this. The people of the Southern Song dynasty all frowned. They were all experienced politicians, and no one would believe that Tang Quobian had done this on a whim for the sake of bringing the Golden Snake Battalion to their side. The Jin Kingdom must have made this marriage happen because they wanted to bring the Golden Snake Battalion to their side. In order to bring the Golden Snake Battalion to their side, the Emperor of the Jin Kingdom was really willing to go all out. This was what many people in the hall were thinking. Some knowledgeable people immediately realized that if the Golden Snake Battalion and the Jin Kingdom worked together, the Southern Song dynasty would be in danger. If the Jin Kingdom can marry a princess, why can't we marry one? No matter how powerful that princess of the Qi Kingdom is, she's only one person. We have Princess Chengda and Princess Rufu on our side. At least we have the advantage in numbers. Many people thought this way, but no one dared to say it out loud before they knew what Zhao Guo was thinking. Zhao Guo, who was sitting on the throne, was also secretly shocked. No wonder Song Qinshu had the confidence to come and propose. He had a trump card like this. He knew that if the Jin Kingdom really did marry the princess of the Qi Kingdom to him, then he would have no choice but to agree to marry the princess. Even if he couldn't bring the Golden Snake Battalion to his side, it would be good for him to remain neutral and not help either side. Zhao Guo coughed and asked, Minister Song, what is the Mongolian princess that you mentioned? The Mongolian kingdom was so powerful that it could be said that it was the strongest country in the world. He really wanted to know what the Mongolian kingdom's attitude toward the Golden Snake Battalion was. The Mongolian prince of Ryong has already betrothed Princess Xiaomin to me. Minister Han can testify to this. Song Qinshu said calmly. The prince of Ryong wasn't here anyway. As for Xiaomin, with my relationship with her, she shouldn't mind me taking advantage of her. Han Xingzhou found that he had become the focus of everyone's attention. He hurriedly said, Last time in Yangzhou, Wang Baobao did call him brother-in-law. How is that possible? Ma Chi-ku panicked. Just now, the Jin Kingdom princess had all the princesses' testimonies, so it wasn't convenient for him to say anything. Now that he was facing Han Xingzhou, his tone wasn't as polite. Minister Han, could it be that because you have a good relationship with Song Qingshu that you are lying for him? Han Xingzhou shouted angrily, Minister Zhua, please watch your words. I am loyal and devoted to His Majesty, so why would I do such a thing? It's not like I'm the only one who knows the titles between Song Qingshu and Wang Baobao. The Emperor's Imperial Guards, Ding Dian and Wu Tianda, as well as Xian Qiji and Lu Yu of the Bureau of Military Affairs, were all present at the scene. Minister Zhua, you can suspect me, and you can even suspect Minister Xian and Minister Lu, but do you suspect His Majesty's imperial equipment? I wouldn't dare, Machi hurriedly said. What a joke. The imperial equipment was the Emperor's closest and most powerful bodyguards. Not only were they all highly skilled in martial arts, but they were also loyal to the royal family. If he suspected these people, he would be slapping Zhao Go in the face and offending a lot of people. After all, everyone with imperial equipment was important. Jia Sherdao, who had been watching from the side, suddenly said, If I may ask, Prince Song, where is Princess Xiaomin now? I gave my son to her last time, and I've lost all contact with him. Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't show it on his face. I wanted to ask your country about this too. After Princess Xiaomin went to Linnan, I lost contact with her. I came south to ask for her hand in marriage, and I also came to ask for an explanation. Zhao Go couldn't sit still anymore. After all, a Mongolian princess had gone missing in the Song dynasty. If he didn't handle it well, the two countries would go to war. Furthermore, the Mongolians were known for being rude and unreasonable. Princess Xiaomin was fine when she left Linnan, but after she left the city for 100 miles, something happened and she disappeared. I've already ordered a thorough investigation, and I'll give the Ruyang Palace an explanation. Song Qingshu smiled. Since the Emperor has said so, he will definitely keep his word. Song Mao will wait for the good news. Zhao Go smiled, but his smile was a little forced. He had been investigating Princess Xiaomin's disappearance for a long time, but other than finding out that someone had mobilized the Imperial Army, he had not found anything else useful. Although he had a rough idea who had mobilized the Imperial Army, he still had no clue as to Princess Xiaomin's whereabouts. Knowing that the power behind Song Qingshu was much stronger than he had imagined, Zhao Go's tone became much more polite than before. Song Mao is honored. Song Qingshu bowed slightly. He knew that Zhao Go was going to discuss with the officials, and there was probably nothing else for him to do. He stood up and took his leave. Zhao Go did not ask him to stay, and sent a eunuch to escort him out of the palace. Walking to a secluded place, Song Qingshu used the soul transfer spell on the eunuch, while he quietly walked in the direction of the cold palace. He had seen someone bestow poisoned wine the night before, and he was still worried about Li Yuanji's safety. He wanted to confirm it again. Chapter 1264. Seeing that Li Yuanji was not in the room, Song Qingshu's heart sank. Could it be that after he left, another eunuch came to bestow white silk and poisoned wine? The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. Song Qingshu could no longer sit still and began to search everywhere. After searching everywhere, there was still no trace of Li Yuanji. Song Qingshu's heart suddenly sank to the bottom. Coincidentally, a palace maid passed by. He grabbed her and asked, "Where did Li Yuanji go in this room?" In a hurry, he directly used the soul transfer technique. The palace maid's willpower was so weak that her eyes instantly became dull. "She seems to have gone to concubine Wu's hall to give thanks." Give thanks? Song Qingshu pressed the palace maid's sleeping acupuncture point. His expression was extremely strange. With his understanding of Li Yuanji, how could he not know what she was planning? It must be the prank from the day before yesterday. She wanted to appreciate the reaction of her masterpiece. She didn't know if she was too tired or guilty yesterday, but today, Li Yuanji finally couldn't hold back the curiosity in her heart. Song Qingshu hesitated. The back palace was guarded by the big boss, Huang Chang. It was a little risky for him to go there. However, he was worried that Li Yuanji would accidentally spill the beans and cause a fatal disaster. In the end, he still rushed in the direction of the palace where Aku lived. Am I more worried about Li Yuanji, or am I more interested in seeing Chen Yuanyuan and Aku's reaction after that night? Song Qingshu muttered to himself all the way. He still did not find the answer when he reached concubine Wu's palace. When Song Qingshu arrived, he just saw the palace maid leading Li Yuanji into the hall. It was too late to stop her, so he could only hide and sneak in. Now that his lightness skill had reached the pinnacle, it was not too difficult for him to avoid the sight of a few palace maids. His whole body was like a wisp of smoke, quietly flying into the palace, hiding on a beam that was several feet high, quietly looking down. He saw Aku sitting on a chair. She was still beautiful, but she was not as radiant as usual. Her face was visibly haggard. Chen Yuanyuan was also in the main hall, and there seemed to be a faint frown between her brows. It was obvious that the events of that day had thrown her into disarray, and she was unable to return to the quiet room to cultivate or study Buddhist scriptures. Compared to them, Li Yuanji's complexion was much rosier. She didn't know if it was because of Song Qingshu's nourishment or because she was happy to see her enemy's fearful appearance. You keep telling the palace maids that you have something important to discuss with me. What is it? Seeing Li Yuanji's high-spirited appearance, Aku felt a wave of displeasure. He thought to himself that she did not look like a person in the cold palace who felt sorry for herself. It was obvious that she was an extremely favored imperial concubine. Especially when he thought about her close relationship with Song Qingshu, he felt even more annoyed. These 2 days, Aku had a lot on her mind. Originally, she didn't want to see her, but the other party kept saying that she had something important to see her. Out of curiosity, she finally let her in. Song Qingshu, who was sitting on the beam, suddenly realized why Li Yuanji ran over so early in the morning and didn't see her until now. It turned out that she was blocked outside. This time, I'm here to thank Concubine Wu and Silent Hermit for saving my life. Li Yuanji bowed respectfully, but her eyes swept back and forth between the mother and daughter. Her gaze especially lingered on Chen Yuanyuan's rosy lips for a long time. Seeing how the two of them looked like they had a lot on their minds, she was overjoyed. This is what you meant by something important? Aku glared at her. Even Li Yuanji, a beauty herself, could not help but sigh. As expected of a peerless beauty. Every frown and every smile was so beautiful. Isn't saving my life something important? Li Yuanji replied innocently. You. Aku was momentarily speechless. Your Highness Wu, you don't look too well. Did you not sleep well for the past 2 days? Is there something on your mind? Li Yuanji Jirua pointed out. No. Aku denied flatly. Feeling a little guilty, she said, what could be on my mind? If your Highness has something on your mind, you can pour it out to me. Although I can't even protect myself right now, I can still be a qualified listener. Li Yuanji continued with a concerned look on her face. However, the slight curl of her lips betrayed her true thoughts at the moment. I already said that there's no need for that. You can leave now. Aku was a little angry. She waved her hand and signaled for the palace maids to take her out. Li Yuanji had a regretful look on her face. I really want to provoke her a little more. Just as she was about to leave, Chen Yuanyuan's voice came from behind. Miss Li, please wait a moment. Song Qingshu, who was sitting on the beam, sighed inwardly. Chen Yuanyuan was known for her beauty and artistic skills back then, and she truly lived up to her reputation. He had already seen her beauty, and although he had never seen her artistic skills, he could roughly imagine how heavenly her songs were just from her gentle voice alone. Silent Wanderer, what can I do for you? Looking at this devastatingly beautiful woman in front of her, Li Yuanji had a complicated expression on her face. Originally, she had a good impression of this beautiful woman because Chen Yuan had helped her out that night. Who knew that she would be one of the main culprits who had harmed her? You really couldn't judge a person by their appearance. Beneath such a gentle and beautiful appearance was a venomous heart. Chen Yuan waved her hand and signaled for the palace maids to leave first. Then, she asked in a low voice, I heard that Miss Li was once a person of the martial world? Li Yuanji didn't understand, but she subconsciously nodded. That's right. Then are you familiar with the martial world? Seeing her nod, Chen Yuan's eyes lit up. I know a thing or two. Li Yuanji was confused. Why was she asking about this? Chen Yuan opened her mouth, as if she had suddenly thought of something. Before she could say anything, her beautiful face was smeared with a layer of red. I wonder if there are any famous Qigong masters in Jianghu? Although Chen Yuan had previously denied her daughter's guess about the martial world experts, the mother and daughter had been thinking about it for the past 2 days, and they couldn't come up with any clues. She couldn't help but be a little shaken. Li Yuanji was a smart girl, so she instantly understood her daughter's intention. She suppressed the pride in her heart and slowly explained, there are countless Qigong experts in the martial world, but the most famous ones are the vicious and evil Cloud Crane and the solitary Tian Buguang. Who are they? Chen Yuan's voice was trembling. After all, the words vicious and evil sounded like they weren't good people. Chapter 1265. Ah! Chen Yuan exclaimed. Aku's face was also not very good. They do such evil things, does no one punish them? Naturally, there are many people who want to enforce justice on behalf of heaven. The mother and daughter had just breathed a sigh of relief when Li Yuanji's next words made their hearts jump again. But these people's lightness skills are very good. They come and go without a trace every time. Even if they are occasionally discovered, they can use the top lightness skills to escape. So they are still at large after so many years. Aku's pretty face was extremely pale, and she asked in a trembling voice, if the security is tight, those perverts, thieves can also get in. Of course they can get in. Feeling the fear in her heart, Li Yuanji became more and more excited. Otherwise, why are all the perverts' lightness skills so good? When he saw Chen Yuan and Aku being frightened to the point of being stunned, Song Qingshu, who sat on the beam, laughed bitterly without end. This little girl really has a lot of tricks up her sleeves. I'm afraid that both of us won't be able to sleep for a very long time. Aku was on tenterhooks. Seeing Li Yuanji's sweet smile, she felt a burst of irritation in her heart. She snorted coldly. Are you happy to see that we are not in good condition? The smile froze on her face. Li Yuanji hurriedly explained, No. Aku snorted. I don't know why, but I always feel that you are gloating. I wanted to slap you before, but I was delayed at that time. Now that you have delivered yourself to me, come on. Looking at the dumbfounded Li Yuanji, Song Qingshu shook his head and smiled bitterly. A woman's sixth sense was really terrible. Aku clearly did not know the truth of the matter, but her feeling led her to subconsciously find the culprit. As he sighed, he took out a silver mask and put it on his face. Song Qingshu could not stand to see Li Yuanji being bullied. Right at this moment, a hand that was as thin as a match appeared out of thin air behind him like a ghost. Although this hand was so thin that it looked like it could be broken by a strong gust of wind, its 5 fingers glowed with a dense and gloomy light. No one would doubt that it contained the power to destroy heaven and earth. Song Qingshu suddenly had a sudden impulse. He quickly turned around and threw a punch. The fist and the claw collided, producing a muffled sound. The entire hall shook, and the dust on the beams rustled down. With the help of the recoil, Song Qingshu shot out, instantly putting a distance of several feet between him and his opponent. The women in the room didn't expect this turn of events. Looking at the masked man who suddenly appeared and the mysterious man hidden in a black cloak on the beam, Aku exclaimed, "Help, there's an assassin!" However, Her pair of almond-shaped eyes instantly widened because there seemed to be an invisible chi wall around her. After the sound she made collided with it, a visible ripple appeared and finally disappeared without a trace. Song Qingshu gave it a glance and a serious look appeared in his eyes. What a powerful aura! No wonder I didn't notice him even though he was so close to me. The person in the black cloak said in a hoarse voice, "Unfortunately, you still managed to dodge it. In this world, the number of people who can dodge my attack can be counted on one hand. Who are you?" This mysterious person was naturally Huang Chang, who he had bumped into before. Song Qingshu did not answer. Instead, he smiled and said, "Senior, you are a man of virtue and prestige. You are a legend in the martial arts world. To think that you would launch a sneak attack on a junior in the martial arts world. In the hearts of the people of Wulin, this old man is already a dead man. A dead man doesn't care about reputation." The indifferent voice came from the cloak. "Moreover, to deal with a pervert like you, there is no need to follow the rules of Wulin. Last time, I let you escape because of a moment of carelessness. Today, I want to see where you can run to." If it was in an open area, he didn't have the confidence to stop the other. But now that he was trapped in the room, he couldn't use his shocking qigong. Huang Chang had the confidence to say such words. At this time, the women in the room finally reacted. Li Yuanji instantly knew Song Qingshu's identity. Seeing that he was wearing a mask, she knew that he didn't want his identity to be exposed. So, she could only grit her teeth and wait for an opportunity to act. "The person that night was you?" Aku and Chen Yuan were both shocked and angry. Their beautiful eyes seemed to be spitting fire. If looks could kill, Song Qingshu would have been pierced by thousands of arrows and died. Song Qingshu smiled bitterly. But now that it was like this, there was no need to deny it. He smiled and said, "It was me." Seeing his eyes that were as clear as water, Aku suddenly felt that his smile was somewhat enchanting. These past few days, she had been imagining the image of the person that night. Her mind was filled with wretched and disgusting faces. Now that she suddenly knew that the other person was such a handsome and elegant young master, she suddenly felt that the night wasn't so unbearable. "Tui Tui, what am I thinking about?" Aku's pretty face instantly turned red. Coupled with her stunning appearance, she looked exceptionally charming. As the saying goes, mother and daughter are connected. Chen Yuan had similar feelings, but she had been through many storms and quickly recovered. She angrily said, "Although you are wearing a mask, I can still see that you are a talented person. Why would you do such a despicable thing?" Since he was going to pretend, he might as well make it look real. Song Qingshu laughed out loud. "Who asked you and your daughter to be such outstanding beauties? I can't get both of you at the same time through normal means, so I have no choice but to use this method." As he said that, his eyes swept over her body with a burning gaze. His gaze seemed to have substance, and Chen Yuan's body trembled. For a moment, she was both embarrassed and angry, and couldn't speak. Huang Chang suddenly snorted, "So he was the one who took advantage of you that night?" "No." Chen Yuan subconsciously wanted to explain that nothing had really happened. But then she suddenly thought of the thing in her mouth when she woke up. What difference was there between that and what had really happened? However, Huang Chang quickly shook his head. Wait, concubine Wu is still a young girl. Although Silent Hermit is no longer a virgin, I can see that she hasn't done it for a long time." How strange, as a Taoist grandmaster, Huang Chang was naturally very sensitive to the Tao of yin and yang. Moreover, he had lived for countless years and had great eyesight. He could see the current situation of Chen Yuan and her daughter at a glance. However, Chen Yuan and Aku were so embarrassed that their skin had turned red. They wished that there was a hole in the ground that they could immediately hide in. "I understand now." Huang Chang raised his head to look at Song Qingshu. You have such a cultivation at such a young age, and you have such shocking lightness skills, but you can't do it. So you are Sun-Moon Sex Invincible East. Chapter 1266. Hearing Huang Chang say that Song Qingshu was impotent, Li Yuanji couldn't help but laugh. How could an old man like him know how good my brother Song is in that area? Images of the two of them being intimate appeared in her mind, and she couldn't help but fall into a daze. Song Qingshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry at being treated as a eunuch. However, he had always wanted to keep his identity a secret, so he admitted, "Senior's eyes are indeed sharp." Hearing him admit it, Chen Yuan and Aka rejoiced, but there was actually a trace of disappointment. They rejoiced because this person really couldn't act like a man, but they were disappointed. They didn't know why they were disappointed. Perhaps it was because they felt a little regretful that such a handsome person wasn't a real man. I have heard some things about the Sunflower Treasured Book. If you wish to cultivate a divine skill, you must castrate yourself. I originally thought that this cultivation method was against the heavens and was destined to be limited. I didn't think that Sect Master Dongfang would be able to reach such a level of cultivation at such a young age with this skill. It really surprises me. Huang Chang was deeply moved, as if he was filled with curiosity about the Sunflower Treasured Book. Song Qingshu was speechless. Only someone with Huang Chang's cultivation had the right to look down on a top skill like the Sunflower Treasured Book. Huang Chang turned to Song Qingshu. The black cloak obscured his face. Although I don't often walk the martial world, I know that Sect Master Dongfang has shaken the martial world a few years ago and is praised by many as the #1 expert in the world. With such a status, why would you come to the palace to steal women? Song Qingshu smiled and said, "Senior's 9 manual is fought over by all the experts in the world, but isn't Senior still working in the palace as a guard for someone else?" Dongfang Bubi's identity was a very good cover. He didn't want to reveal his identity in front of Song Hetan, or else there would be a lot of variables. In any case, Dongfang Mushue was one of them. She probably wouldn't mind borrowing her identity. You have a sharp tongue. You do have the vigor of a young man. Huang Chang wasn't angry but rather admired him. "Senior, you flatter me." Song Qingshu's attitude was extremely humble. After all, he had also learned the 9 manual, so Song Qingshu could be considered half a master to him. Huang Shang sighed and said, "In the past, my parents, wife, and son were all killed by the Ming cult. After that, I focused on studying martial arts and seeking revenge. When I finally mastered my martial arts, I realized that my old enemies were either dead or old. There was no longer any meaning in seeking revenge. The Sun-Moon sect and the Ming dynasty are inextricably linked. Since Sect Master Dongfang is the sect master of the Sun-Moon sect and is known as the #1 expert in the world, please settle this grudge on behalf of your seniors." Song Qingshu was speechless. He thought to himself, "I've really been shot while lying down. Even if I want to impersonate someone like Dongfang Mushue, who has enemies all over the world, I can't impersonate someone like her. I don't want you to complain that I'm bullying the weak. This time, you can make the first move," Huang Chang lightly said. Song Qingshu was startled. "Shouldn't you be the one giving me 3 moves?" Huang Chang was silent for a long time before saying, "Your martial arts are too high. I don't have the confidence to win even if I give you 3 moves, so I won't." Song Qingshu was so angry that he laughed instead. "That's a bit unbecoming of a senior," Huang Chang lightly replied. "The world is heartless and treats all living things like dogs. I've long since seen through such empty titles. I've seen many shameless people, but it's rare to see someone as righteous as you." Song Qingshu laughed involuntarily. Huang Chang was not angry at all. "Your martial arts are so high, and you're young and strong, while I'm old and weak. You should be the one giving me 3 moves to show respect for the old and love the young." Song Qingshu was startled for a moment, then immediately smiled. If the old urchin met you, he would definitely treat you as a close friend. Huang Chang shook his head. I know a thing or two about Zhou Badong. In name, he's Wang Chongyang's younger martial brother, but in reality, he's half a disciple. His original martial arts can only be described as SOSO, but after practicing my 9-in manual and combining it with his self-created left and right mutual combat, he's become a bit more formidable. To put it nicely, he's ignorant of the ways of the world. To put it bluntly, he's simple-minded. I've already reached the realm of indifference and natural Tao. Even though we look the same on the surface, we're fundamentally different. He can't be my close friend. Song Qingshu was startled, then immediately understood. I'm slow-witted. Senior, please. Huang Chang didn't decline. His body flashed like a rock, spreading its wings and pouncing toward Zhou Badong. One hand reached for Zhou Badong's face and the other covered the major acupuncture point on Zhou Badong's chest. Song Qingshu secretly laughed. Even though Huang Chang's cultivation was high, he was still far from being able to reach Song Qingshu with such speed. Huang Chang was, after all, an expert who had been famous for decades. Song Qingshu didn't dare to take the attack head-on. He planned to dodge the attack first and then wait for an opportunity to counterattack. Who knew that when he pushed off the ground with the tip of his foot, his body didn't float away as he had expected. Instead, he stayed where he was. Careful. Li Yuanji, who was watching from the side, saw that Huang Chang's attack had already reached in front of Song Qingshu. His 10 fingers were like they were about to pierce through her lover's body, but her lover was still in a daze. Li Yuanji was so scared that she wanted to scream a warning, but her opponent was too fast. The surrounding air seemed to have suddenly become extremely thick, making it hard for her to breathe. Her mouth was wide open, but not a single sound came out. Chen Yuanyuan and Aku, who were watching from the side, had complicated feelings. Logically, they should have hated Song Qingshu and wanted nothing more than for him to lose. But seeing him in danger, they didn't know why, but for some reason, they couldn't feel happy. Could it be that Huang Chang was hiding in his cloak like a ghost and wasn't as likable as Song Qingshu? The 3 girls quickly calmed down. It turned out that Song Qingshu had twisted his body in the nick of time to avoid his opponent's fatal attack. 5 fingers exerting strength, nothing is unbreakable, destroying the enemy's head like piercing through rotten soil. The passage from the 9-in manual appeared in Song Qingshu's mind, and he sighed in his heart. If Zhirua saw how his opponent used the 9-in white bone claw, she would probably be too ashamed to admit that she also knew the 9-in white bone claw. But what made him sigh the most was not Huang Chang's 9-in white bone claw, but the fact that when his opponent attacked, the surrounding air seemed to become solid, becoming incomparably thick, turning into invisible shackles that prevented him from moving. If it weren't for the fact that his martial arts were high enough and he was able to barely dodge in the nick of time, then not only would victory and defeat have been decided, but life and death would have been decided. Lowering his head to look at his chest, he saw that his clothes were in tatters and there were a few bloodstains on his chest. Song Qingshu curiously asked, "Senior, what kind of martial arts is this? Is it a domain?" In his previous life, he had seen so many movies and novels that the word domain slipped out of his mouth. Domain? That name is quite appropriate. Huang Chang paused and stopped his attack. This is something that I have comprehended in recent years. It can control the surrounding environment to a certain extent. Boy, you should be careful. Song Qingshu nodded, his face no longer showing the frivolity from before. With a serious expression, he said, "Junior also has a technique here. I hope Senior can teach me." Chapter 1267. Huang Chang was, after all, a senior and did not have any enmity with Song Qingshu. Speaking of which, the 9-in manual that he and Zhou Zhirua practiced was left behind by the other. Therefore, even though he had the opportunity to attack the other's vitals, he still chose to attack the shoulder, an insignificant part of the body. However, his current cultivation was much higher. Although this punch was not meant to intimidate people, there was a faint light in front of his fist. If Huang Chang was hit, he would most likely lose the ability to fight. Brother Song is amazing. Li Yuanji's eyes were filled with red hearts. The feelings of a young girl were always poetic. Of course, they could not wait for their lover to be as strong as possible. Chen Yuan and Ah Ku's fingers were intertwined. It was clear that they were very nervous. When they saw that Song Qinshu was in danger, they were inexplicably worried. Now that they saw that Huang Chang was in danger, they were even more worried. After all, if Song Qinshu won, who knew what kind of fate they would face? However, their eyes quickly widened. They saw Huang Chang's arm suddenly retract a few inches from his body, just in time to avoid Song Qinshu's sure-kill blow. Tendon shrink bone technique? Song Qinshu had learned the 9-in manual before, so he naturally knew that there was such a martial art in it. He had always felt that it was of little value, but he did not expect that it could be used in such a miraculous manner. As he was lost in thought, Huang Chang's retracted arm suddenly shot out. Song Qinshu's expression changed, and he hurriedly moved a few feet to the side. Unfortunately, his opponent's 5 fingers still swept across his elbow. He felt his arm go numb, and all the strength in his body disappeared. 5-string hand. Song Qinshu instantly recognized this move from the 9-in manual, but he had no time to think about it. The most important thing now was to deal with Huang Chang's pursuit. Even though all the strength in his body disappeared for only a moment, but for a master of Huang Chang's level, this moment was more than enough. Seeing that there was no way to avoid it, Song Qinshu's eyes suddenly flashed with a strange light. A small figure holding a sword appeared in his pupils, as if it was ready to rush out at any time. Huang Chang felt his heart palpitate as he sensed that the air around him had suddenly changed, as if it was no longer under his control. His great grandmaster instinctively made him raise his hand, and from his sleeve shot out a long, black whip that wrapped around a distant beam. With a forceful tug, his entire body instantly retreated several dozen feet. His cloak fluttered without any wind, and in an instant it expanded several times. He slowly raised his palms, and the air around him visibly twisted. Even the light rays began to distort. Not far away, the women only glanced at him and immediately felt disgusted and nauseous. They were so scared that they quickly closed their eyes. Seeing Huang Chang as if he was facing a great enemy, Song Qinshu smiled, and the golden figure in his eyes gradually faded. With a tap of his foot, he appeared behind Chen Yuan and Ah Ku. Looking at Huang Chang, he said, "Senior, there is no deep hatred between us. Why must we fight to the death? Why don't we just let it go?" Hearing the voice in their ears, Ah Ku and Chen Yuan realized that Song Qinshu was already by their side. They couldn't help but turn pale. Ah Ku unconsciously attacked behind her, but as soon as she raised her hand, she felt all the strength in her body disappear, and her hand weakly drooped down. It is difficult for a disobedient woman to gain the favor of a man. Song Qinshu moved closer to her ear and said. His hot breath instantly smeared a layer of red on Ah Ku's pretty face. At the same time, Li Yuanji, who was not far away, pouted her small mouth. The air around Huang Chang gradually calmed down, and a black cloak appeared again. His voice was full of seriousness. "What kung fu did you use just now? A kung fu that should not exist in this world." Song Qinshu's words had a double meaning. From the name, it seemed that the 23 swords was a kung fu from the wind and clouds, and indeed could not be considered a kung fu of this world. Huang Chang wanted to ask more, but he suddenly frowned and closed his mouth. Immediately after, the palace door was smashed open, and a large group of guards rushed in. It turned out that after fighting for so long, the guards of the palace had finally been alerted. "How dare you trespass into the forbidden area of the palace? Arrest them all." Seeing the situation in the room, the leader of the guards was shocked and angry. He waved his hand, and the guards surrounded Song Qinshu and Huang Chang. Song Qinshu laughed involuntarily. Huang Chang's identity was mysterious, and there were probably only a few people in the palace who knew who he was. Now, the flood had rushed into the temple of the Dragon King. Previously, you were acting like a policeman catching a thief, and now you have become a thief with me. I want to see how you will deal with this situation. However, his smile quickly froze. This was because Huang Chang quickly raised a shining golden token. After the group of guards picked it up, their expressions changed, and they all knelt down in unison. Arrest this person. Huang Chang pointed to the other side, and Song Qinshu immediately became the focus of everyone present. I say, Old Huang, this is boring. What happened to one-on-one? What happened to one-on-one? Song Qinshu said gloomily. Although the guards of the palace were not top-notch experts in the Jianghu, many of them could be the sect leader of a small sect. As the saying went, ants could bite an elephant to death, and there was also Huang Chang eyeing them like a tiger watching its prey. Humans follow the earth follows the heavens follow the Daos, and the Daos follow the natural laws. As long as I can keep you here, why would I want to fight you one-on-one? Huang Chang's indifferent voice came from the cloak. Song Qinshu was speechless for a moment. Only now did he remember that Huang Chang had already cultivated to the level of forgetfulness. Trying to use the moral rules of the mortal world to restrict him was a fool's dream. Concubine Wu and Silent Hermit are in my hands. If you don't want to hurt them, then back off. Since Huang Chang was unmoved by force or persuasion, Song Qinshu could only start with the normal guards. As expected, the guards stopped in their tracks. They were different from Huang Chang. They knew that Concubine Wu was favored, and if anything happened to her, they would have to bear the consequences. Therefore, they all held back. Let go of Concubine Wu. This is a crime that will result in the execution of your entire family. Let go of Concubine Wu, and you can be dealt with leniently. The surrounding guards were clamoring with one another. Song Qinshu chuckled. I'm not a 3-year-old child. What's the point of talking to me like this? Suddenly, his expression changed. He turned around and saw Huang Chang pouncing towards him like a great rock. Song Qinshu frowned. Now that he was surrounded, he didn't want to waste his energy fighting Huang Chang. Instead, he grabbed Chen Yuanyuan's shoulder and placed her in front of him. He planned to use her as a meat shield to avoid Huang Chang while he took the opportunity to escape. However, to his surprise, Huang Chang didn't seem to have any intention of stopping even though Chen Yuanyuan was between the two of them. He still threw a great demon-subduing fist at Chen Yuanyuan. Under everyone's shocked gazes, the fist landed on Chen Yuanyuan's body. Chen Yuanyuan spurted out a mouthful of blood, her whole body slamming into Song Qinshu's body. Song Qinshu instantly felt a strange force coming from Chen Yuanyuan's body. Hitting the cow across the mountain. Song Qinshu instantly understood Huang Chang's plan. He originally had enough time to dodge, but once he dodged, the force contained in Chen Yuanyuan's body would have nowhere to be released. This peerless beauty would most likely perish on the spot. Gritting his teeth, he covered his chest with a gentle force and held Chen Yuanyuan in his arms, using his body to dissolve the violent spiral force of the fist. Even though he was prepared in advance, but this was equivalent to receiving a full force blow from Huang Chang's great demon-subduing fist. Song Qinshu only felt a strong force coming from his chest, a sweet taste in his throat, and he almost fainted. Vertical and Horizontal's double monthly tickets are here. 1 monthly ticket counts as 2. The event will end at 12 noon on the 19th. Today I should be able to update 5 to 6 chapters. I'm not sure how many I can update in the next few days. I can only say that I'll do my best. Everyone, please give this monk more monthly tickets. Chapter 1268. I didn't expect you to be such a loyal person. You would rather be injured to save Chen Yuan. Although Huang Chang's tone was one of admiration, his hands did not stop. He continued to press forward. No! Seeing his mother spit out blood after being punched by Huang Chang, Aku felt a chill run down his spine. He finally reacted and was replaced with anger. He didn't know where he got the courage to open his arms and block Huang Chang. I won't let you hurt my mother! Your Highness! Seeing Huang Chang's attack about to land on Aku, the guards not far away all cried out. Huang Chang frowned. The person in front of him was the Emperor's concubine. If he heard her, he hesitated and his attack slowed. Song Qingshu took this opportunity to break through the window with Chen Yuan in his arms. He quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. After him, the group of guards all unsheathed their long swords and charged out. Huang Chang did not move. He had fought with Song Qingshu many times and knew that with Song Qingshu's lightness skills, he would not be able to catch up to him now that he had the advantage. If they were on an open plain, he could try to use Huang Chang's injury to give chase. However, the terrain of the Imperial Palace was complicated. Huang Chang had hundreds of ways to shake him off. Shaking his head, Huang Chang turned and walked into the shadows in the corner. Just as he was about to disappear into the darkness, Aku suddenly ran in front of him and blocked his way. Even though he was trembling with fear, Aku stubbornly stared at him. Why did you kill my mother? Huang Chang coldly replied, I didn't want to kill your mother. I just wanted to keep that person alive. But what if that person didn't save her? Even though Aku was not an expert, she could still see that Huang Chang's punch had not been merciful. If it weren't for the fact that Song Qingshu had helped his mother neutralize most of the force, the two of them would probably be far apart now. Then I'll get rid of a femme fatale for the great Song. Huang Chang's tone was emotionless. Femme fatale? Aku muttered to herself and did not react. I cry for the 6 armies in mourning for a beauty. One Chen Yuan caused the Central Plains to fall under the iron cavalry of the outsiders. It is not good fortune for the great Song to have such an inauspicious woman in the palace. After Huang Chang left these words, the light around him twisted and quickly disappeared without a trace. Aku stood rooted to the ground, her whole body trembling with anger. You men don't have the ability, so you push all the blame on a woman. As Chen Yuan's daughter, she had heard many similar remarks since she was a child. Even though she did not agree with them, as the saying goes, public opinion can melt gold. This was the common view of everyone, and she was powerless to refute it. She thought of how she had left her hometown to come to the southern Song dynasty thousands of miles away. For the sake of her father's great cause, she had to marry a man she didn't like. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that her mother had accompanied her all the way, but now her only support was leaving her. The more Aku thought about it, the sadder she became. Don't be too sad. Your mother will be fine. Li Yuanji walked over and comforted her. She did not like Aku and Chen Yuan, but Huang Chang had hurt her lover. She suddenly felt that Aku was not as annoying as she thought. Plus, Song Qingshu was injured. Luckily, Aku had stepped in during the critical moment, giving her lover a chance to escape. Seeing Aku so sad, Li Yuanji could not help but comfort her. How do you know my mother will be fine? Aku looked as if she had found a life-saving straw. She raised her head and looked at Li Yuanji with tears in her beautiful eyes. Li Yuanji thought to herself, I can't tell you that Brother Song is such a gentle and protective person, so it's impossible for him to let Chen Yuan get hurt. Li Yuanji had no choice but to answer, that person was willing to get hurt just to save Silent Hermit. He even took her with him when he left. I'm afraid he was worried that she would be killed by the ghost if he left her here. Li Yuanji did not know who Huang Chang was, so she used another name. After all, Huang Chang usually hid in a cloak and looked like a ghost. Is that person really not going to hurt Mother? Aku muttered to herself. She thought about what that mysterious person did to her and her mother that night, but he saved her mother today. For a moment, she did not know whether she should hate him or thank him. Song Qingshu carried Chen Yuanyuan and turned left and right in the palace. Soon, he had shaken off the pursuers. Because the cold palace was relatively secluded, he returned to Li Yuanji's residence. Ugh! As soon as he placed Chen Yuanyuan on the bed, Song Qingshu spat out a mouthful of blood. He had been injured by Huang Chang's demon-subduing fist and had been running all the way, aggravating his injuries. He did not have time to recover, causing his blood to surge. Now that he had calmed down a little, he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Huang Chang's all-out attack was extremely powerful. Fortunately, Song Qingshu had divine techniques to protect his body. In addition, he had been prepared when he received the attack, so he did not suffer any irreversible injuries. However, he still needed to recover immediately. Sitting cross-legged on the bed, Song Qingshu circulated his inner qi a few times before he finally regained his breath. If it was half a year ago, he would probably need to recuperate for 10 days to half a month to recover from such an injury. However, with his current cultivation, his injury would almost recover after a few cycles of recuperation. Suddenly, Song Qingshu opened his eyes and saw that Chen Yuanyuan had pulled out the golden hairpin from her hair and was struggling to crawl over. She pressed the sharp end of the golden hairpin against his neck, her face extremely pale. Song Qingshu frowned. "What are you doing?" Chen Yuanyuan bit her lip. "You tainted my innocence. Before I die, I will drag you down with me." Song Qingshu laughed involuntarily. "When did I taint your innocence? I didn't even touch you from beginning to end, okay?" "Nonsense." Chen Yuanyuan's originally pale face suddenly flushed red. "If you didn't touch me, then my mouth wouldn't be filled with that filthy stuff." "What filthy stuff?" Song Qingshu asked, even though he already knew the answer. "You." Chen Yuanyuan's phoenix eyes narrowed. She could no longer suppress the anger in her heart. The golden hairpin in her hand forcefully stabbed towards his neck. Ding! Chen Yuanyuan felt her palm go numb. She could no longer hold the golden hairpin. It flew to the side and stabbed into a pillar. The end of the golden hairpin trembled, showing just how powerful the other's finger was. The golden hairpin left her hand. Chen Yuanyuan immediately lost her center of gravity. Her entire body softly fell to the ground. However, she didn't fall onto the hard floor like she had imagined. Instead, she fell into a warm embrace. "Madam, be careful. If you injure this devastatingly beautiful face, who knows how many men in this world will sigh with regret." Song Qingshu smiled slightly. Frivolous and shameless person, Chen Yuanyuan's impression of Song Qingshu once again fell to the freezing point. She angrily and anxiously tried to push him away. "Don't touch me. You really don't want me to touch you?" Song Qingshu's smile carried a trace of a strange flavor. Of course. Chen Yuanyuan was already injured and weak. Being teased like this, she immediately panicked. "All right then." Song Qingshu instantly retracted his hands. Chen Yuanyuan was seriously injured and had relied on his support to stabilize herself. This sudden turn of events caused her to instantly lose her center of gravity and fall into Song Qingshu's arms. What's more, because she was facing downwards, her face directly fell between Song Qingshu's legs. Chapter 1269. Wu Chen Yuanyuan wanted to get up several times, but she was seriously injured and had no strength left in her body. There were several times when she wanted to raise her head, but she still fell back down. In front of her was a man's masculine aura. Chen Yuanyuan simply wished that there was a hole in the ground that she could immediately hide in. Song Qingshu spread out his hands and innocently said, "Right now it's not me touching you, but you touching me." Chen Yuanyuan was embarrassed and anxious, but she had no other choice. She couldn't keep lying on his thighs in this position, so she could only admit defeat and said, "You quickly help me up." No, Song Qingshu hurriedly shook his head and deliberately dragged out his voice. Madam clearly said that I am not allowed to touch you. I don't want to be treated as a frivolous and shameless person again. Hearing that he was deliberately teasing her, Chen Yuan was so angry that her teeth itched. She really wanted to open her mouth and ruthlessly bite him, but thinking of what she would bite if she opened her mouth, she didn't dare to do so. Lowering his head to admire the beauty in his arms, he saw that her hair was messy, and strands of black hair fell on her snow-white slender neck. The contrast between the two colors seemed to emit a kind of enchanting luster, causing Song Qingshu's heart to be moved, and he couldn't help but lower his head to kiss her neck. Chen Yuan didn't expect this unforeseen event. The man's hot and gentle kiss on her neck made her somewhat absent-minded for a moment. She hadn't been touched by a man for a long time. She didn't expect that this touch would actually make her whole body tremble, a kind of trembling that came from her soul. In her life, it could be said that beauty had a short life. Because of this world-famous beauty, she was coveted by too many men. Because of this, she understood men better than any other woman in the world. If an ordinary girl encountered this kind of situation, she would only think that the other party was lusting after her heart, but she could feel the other party's tenderness and love for her from this gentle kiss. She could feel that his kiss was only out of appreciation for beautiful things, a natural involuntary feeling, and not out of sensual desire like other men. In her bumpy life, she had experienced too many men. Whether it was Wu Sangue or Li Zicheng, no matter how modest they appeared to be, as soon as they went to bed, they would reveal an impatient, dirty and ugly appearance. Subconsciously they would want to take off her skirt. Who would really take pity on her like that? No matter how she thought about it, the only person in the world who could love her so much was probably Hu Yizhi of the Three Holy Nunnery. For her, he was willing to transform from a dignified knife king into an old farmer, weeding weeds and growing vegetables in the Three Holy Nunnery all day for more than 10 years. During this period, the two of them had only exchanged 20 or 30 words. Chen Yuan didn't know his identity until later. Although she was touched, she didn't have any special feelings towards him. In her opinion, there was nothing wrong with being infatuated, but pursuing a partner was not like raising a pet. It was enough as long as he was good to her. The relationship between a man and a woman was about mutual love, and such love required a certain personality trait that the other party could appreciate and rely on. But unfortunately, there was nothing on Hu Yizhi that Chen Yuan appreciated. When Chen Yuan was a teenager, she was the most beautiful woman in Qinhuai. What kind of pursuers had she not seen? Like Hu Yizhi, who was infatuated, she didn't know how many of them she had seen. These people didn't treat her as a woman, but rather as a high and mighty goddess. Although Chen Yuan also enjoyed this kind of feeling, enjoyment was one thing. The unequal status between the two of them at the beginning doomed her to not have any special feelings for this type of pursuer. In her heart, the status of people like Hu Yizhi was not even as important as Wu Sangue or Li Zicheng. However, Chen Yuan didn't have much feelings for Wu Sangue and Li Zicheng. After all, the two of them only regarded her as a beautiful plaything. These years, Chen Yuan had been living alone in the dead of night. She would often feel sorry for herself. The men she knew in this life were more than the men an ordinary woman would know in 10 lifetimes, but she didn't have a partner who could truly be with her. It could be said that this was the biggest regret of her life. But she didn't know why. Being kissed by this mysterious young man made her feel like her whole body was electrocuted. Her heart was beating faster. She was shy and also a little scared. How could she have this kind of feeling towards this perverted thief? Maybe it's an illusion when I'm about to die. Chen Yuan's chest became more and more stuffy. She only felt pain all over her body. Sensing her strangeness, Song Qingshu no longer teased her. He helped her up and gently placed her on the bed. He held her hand and felt her pulse. He couldn't help but frown. Just now, although Huang Chang used the hitting the bull through the mountain, there was still a small part of the force left in Chen Yuanyuan's body. Fortunately, the power of the great subduing devil fist was dissolved by his own body. Otherwise, this peerless beauty would have already died. But even so, Huang Chang's 100 years of cultivation was amazing. How could Chen Yuanyuan's delicate body bear it? She only had half a life left. Am I about to die? Looking at the man sitting on the bed with a dignified aura, Chen Yuanyuan really couldn't connect him with the perverted thief who bullied her and her mother that night. Song Qingshu sighed. You are indeed seriously injured. Even if the Imperial Hospital comes, I'm afraid they won't be able to do anything. So it's like that. Chen Yuanyuan's eyes were calm, as if she had already mentally prepared herself. In any case, a femme fatale like me should have died long ago. Sensing her pulse was getting weaker and weaker, Song Qingshu knew that she had given up her will to live. He couldn't help but be angry and anxious. I haven't finished speaking. The Imperial Hospital can't save you, but that doesn't mean I can't save you. Chen Yuanyuan only thought that he was comforting her, so she didn't mind. Her pair of beautiful eyes quietly looked at him. Can you promise me one thing? Say it, whether you agree or not depends on my mood. Song Qingshu used his zhenqi to check her body's injuries as he lightly replied. Chen Yuanyuan was startled. It must be known that since she was a teenager, all the men she met were obedient to her. Even if she met one or two who pretended to be cold and arrogant, they wouldn't refuse her when she begged so softly. How could they be like this man? Can you take off your mask and let me see? Perhaps the other party's previous attitude made her expect that she would be rejected. When Chen Yuanyuan said this, not only did she pay attention to the softness of her tone, but she also blinked her pair of watery eyes, as if they could speak, constantly conveying her pleading meaning. Are you seducing me? Noticing her expression, a trace of a smile appeared in Song Qingshu's eyes. Chen Yuanyuan's white jade-like cheeks instantly blushed. Ever since she left Qinhuai River, she had not deliberately used these little tricks to display her charm for decades. She didn't expect that she would take the initiative to use it on a young man today, but she also didn't expect to receive such a reply. I'm afraid that he really isn't a real man like I guessed before. A thought suddenly appeared in Chen Yuanyuan's mind. While she was glad, there was a trace of inexplicable regret in her heart. It wasn't easy for her to meet a man whose soul was compatible with hers, but who knew that the other party was actually not a man. Chapter 1270. Chen Yuanyuan's face suddenly turned red, because she suddenly remembered the situation when she was lying between his legs. Although she had only touched him a few times unconsciously, that kind of heart-wrenching hardness was deeply imprinted in her heart. If such a person was not considered a man, then perhaps no one in the world could be considered a man. Seeing Chen Yuanyuan suddenly reveal a coquettish look, Song Qingshu smiled bitterly and said, Great aunt, if you want to seduce me, at least find another time. Now that you are seriously injured, even if I am moved, I can't do it. Hearing his absurd words, Chen Yuanyuan lightly spat. Great aunt, in your heart, am I very old? The hidden bitterness and melancholy in her tone was really distressing, but the coquettish tone was even stronger, as if she was flirting with a lover. Obviously, she also noticed her abnormality, and couldn't help but blush slightly. She thought to herself that this person had clearly done such things to her and Aku, but why did she not hate him deep in her heart? Was it because he risked being injured to save her just now? Chen Yuanyuan thought hard for a long time, but she still couldn't come up with any conclusion. She didn't know that there was a special term for this kind of psychology in the future, called anchor effect. Simply put, if a person did 100 good things first and did one bad thing in the end, people would think that he was a hypocrite. On the other hand, if a person did 100 bad things first and did one good thing in the end, people would think that he was actually not that bad. In the end, people's psychological expectations were different. If a person did 100 good things, people's expectations of him would unknowingly become very high, so it was very difficult for him to do one bad thing. If a person did 100 bad things, people's expectations of him would be very low, but once the other person did a good thing, people would be very surprised. Chen Yuanyuan was like this. At first, she thought that the person that night was a despicable, shameless, disgusting, and wretched pervert, but today, when she saw Song Qingshu's appearance, although he was masked, she could see that he was an elegant young master, which was completely different from the image she had imagined. In her heart there was a trace of joy and a good impression. Later, at the moment of life and death, he actually risked his own injury to save her, so she couldn't hate him at all. Of course, another very important reason was that Chen Yuanyuan thought that she was about to die, otherwise she wouldn't have dreamt back to her teenage years. "Hey, where did this beautiful little girl come from?" Song Qingshu said in an exaggerated tone. "Bah, glib." Perhaps it was because she was born in the dust, and had seen too many glib-tongued people. Chen Yuanyuan actually hated this kind of people from the bottom of her heart. But she didn't know why she couldn't feel the slightest bit of disgust today. "I'm about to die, and you won't even agree to my last request?" It had become Chen Yuanyuan's obsession to see the face under the mask. For this, she didn't even hesitate to put on a pitiful look. Song Qingshu shook his head and refused without hesitation. "If Madame sees me, she will definitely regret using all her skills to look at me. I promise I won't regret it." Chen Yuanyuan's eyes lit up when she heard that his tone seemed to have softened. "No, it wasn't easy for you to have a glimmer of life, because of your obsession. I can't let it disappear just like that." Song Qingshu had already used his Jinqi to explore the injuries in her body, and he had a rough plan on how to save her. While the two of them were in a stalemate, a girl's anxious voice suddenly came from outside the door. "Brother Song, Brother Song?" It turned out that Li Yuanji was worried about Song Qingshu. After comforting Ah Ku, she came back from her room. Thinking that Song Qingshu might return to her room, she ran back anxiously. Especially when she thought of the scene of Song Qingshu being injured, she was so anxious that she began to call from afar. Anyway, there were few people in the cold palace, and there was no one in a radius of several dozen feet, so she wasn't afraid of being heard by others. She pushed open the door and saw that her lover was indeed there. Her worried heart finally relaxed, and she threw herself into his arms with a wisp of fragrance. She muttered to herself, expressing her worries, Brother Song, boo-hoo, I thought something happened to you, boo-hoo." Suddenly seeing the blood stains on his chest, Li Yuanji panicked. She hurriedly raised her head and held her lover's cheek. "Brother Song, how are you? Don't scare me," because the mask was a little scratchy. She took it off. Song Qingshu's face was originally filled with black lines. He thought that this silly girl kept calling him Big Brother Song, so wouldn't that expose his identity? Just as he was thinking about how to cover up his lie, he didn't expect that she would take off her mask, and it was too late to stop her. "It's you." Chen Yuanyuan was shocked and angry. Just now, when she saw Li Yuanji run in, she was very shocked. Hearing the other party call him Big Brother Song, a person's appearance suddenly appeared in her mind. When the mask was taken off, the guess in her heart was finally confirmed. "Ah!" Li Yuanji was shocked by the sudden voice. Only then did she realize that there was someone else on the bed. She turned around and saw Song Qingshu's depressed face. She blinked her eyes innocently. "Brother Song, if I say that I didn't do it on purpose, would you believe me?" Song Qingshu sighed gloomily. "Does it make a difference whether you believe me or not?" Li Yuanji went over and shook his arm. She said coquettishly, "Brother Song, don't be angry with me. I only had eyes for you just now. I didn't expect you to bring another woman back." Hearing the sarcasm in her words, Song Qingshu knew that the little girl was a little jealous. After all, to a certain extent, this was their love nest. Of course, she had a little problem with the addition of another woman for no reason. Okay, I won't be angry, okay? After comforting Li Yuanji, Song Qingshu turned around and found that Chen Yuanyuan was staring at him with her almond-shaped eyes. He couldn't help but feel embarrassed. It was strange. Just now, with the mask on, he could flirt with her as much as he wanted. Everything was under his control. But now that the mask was taken off, he was at a loss. Song Qingshu, Golden Snake King. I didn't expect you to be such a shameless person. You have an affair with women. If it is spread in Jianghu, it will be enough to ruin your reputation. Originally, Chen Yuanyuan had a good impression of him. Under the mask, she wouldn't have reacted so strongly. But Song Qingshu was the only one who couldn't. Firstly, when Song Qingshu went to Shanghai Pass as a diplomatic envoy, he said that bringing Aku back to Yanjing was just for show. In the end, her daughter was put under house arrest. Because of her love for her daughter, she naturally didn't have a good impression of Song Qingshu. Secondly, a mother knows her daughter best. She knew that Aku had a complicated love and hate for Song Qingshu. Although she didn't think much of it, compared to people like Fu Kangan and Zhao Go, Song Qingshu didn't find it so hard to accept. As a result, she had subconsciously treated Song Qingshu as a junior or son-in-law. Now that she found out that the candidate for son-in-law in her heart was actually the pervert who had done those things to her, such an inhuman thing instantly caused her to explode. Chapter 1271. Li Yuanji originally planned to watch the show, but when she heard Chen Yuanyuan insulting her lover, she immediately got angry. She stepped forward and shouted angrily, "Who are you calling shameless?" Chen Yuanyuan said coldly, "Ask your man yourself. He knows what he did to me." Li Yuanji snorted, "Don't ask him. I know what happened to you." "You're not angry?" Chen Yuanyuan was stunned. Seeing her indifferent look, she felt that it was unbelievable. How could a woman not be angry after knowing that her man had done such a dirty thing? Thinking of what happened that night, Chen Yuanyuan faintly felt that there seemed to be a dirty taste in her mouth again. "Why should I be angry?" Li Yuanji rolled her eyes and said angrily, "Don't blame my brother Song wrongly. I was the one who bullied you that night." "It was you?" Chen Yuanyuan only felt inexplicable. "How is it possible? You're a girl. How could you have that kind of dirty thing?" A layer of red appeared on her snow-white slender neck. "Why is it impossible? I can just use my mouth." Li Yuanji snorted and described the situation at the time with gestures. Chen Yuanyuan was ashamed and angry. "How can you be so vicious?" "I'm vicious? You said I'm vicious?" Li Yuanji was so angry that she laughed. "You should know how I lost my chastity and how I was banished to the cold palace." Chen Yuanyuan's face changed. You know it all? Don't do it if you don't want others to know." Li Yuanji stared at her coldly. "I didn't expect you to be so vicious under your beautiful skin." "I'm sorry about that." Chen Yuanyuan looked apologetic, "but we were just following orders." "Whose orders?" Song Qingshu interrupted and asked. Chen Yuanyuan opened her mouth, hesitated for a moment, but did not answer. She sighed faintly. "It doesn't matter whose orders I listen to. Anyway, I'm going to die soon. I'll make it up to Miss Li with my death." "In your dreams. You were already dead in Concubine Wu's palace just now. It was Brother Song who risked his own injuries to save you. He took such a big risk, but you died. Isn't it a big loss for us?" Li Yuanji said angrily. No one knew if she was angry at Chen Yuanyuan or Song Qingshu. "Ahem." Chen Yuanyuan coughed. "Then what do you want?" "We'll talk about it after you've recovered." Chen Yuanyuan's voice was weak and powerless. Coupled with her pale but stunning face, even Li Yuanji's heart softened a little. "Humph, she really is a vixen." Li Yuanji cursed silently. "I'm afraid I won't be able to recover from this injury." Chen Yuanyuan smiled bitterly, but she was still very charming. Li Yuanji snorted. "With Brother Song here, even if you die, he can cure you." Seeing the proud expression on the girl's face, Chen Yuanyuan shook her head, thinking that a girl in love would have a kind of blind worship towards her lover. Although Chen Yuanyuan did not know medicine, she was very clear about the condition of her body. She felt that if she closed her eyes, she would not wake up at any time. It was obvious that she was close to the end of her life. Earlier, she had been relying on her obsession to hold on. Now that she knew Song Qingshu's identity, her obsession instantly disappeared and was replaced by a deep sense of melancholy. Coupled with her guilt towards Li Yuanji, she finally could not hold on anymore. Sensing that Chen Yuanyuan's breath was getting weaker, Song Qingshu hurriedly said, "Sister Yuanji, guard the door for me and pay attention to the movements outside. I have to treat her immediately." However, Li Yuanji was a little hesitant. "Brother Song, you seem to be injured too." Song Qingshu shook his head. "It's fine. I know what I'm doing." Their conversation fell into Chen Yuanyuan's ears. She gathered her strength and pushed Song Qingshu's hand away. "I don't want you to save me." Song Qingshu frowned. "Even if it's not for yourself, think about Aku. If you die, what will she do?" Aku. Thinking of her daughter, Chen Yuanyuan subconsciously hesitated. However, she quickly shook her head. "She's already grown up. I can't stay with her forever." Seeing that she could not do anything, Song Qingshu suddenly became angry. "It's fine if you don't want me to save you. When you die, I'll strip you naked and hang you at the main entrance of the palace so that all the men in the world can admire your body." "You're shameless." Chen Yuanyuan was so angry that her whole body was trembling. From the time she could remember, all the men in front of her would show their perfect side to her. There was no one like Song Qingshu. "Whatever you say." Song Qingshu fiercely glared at her, as if to prove that he was not lying. Wow. That scene will be very interesting." Li Yuanji, who was standing at the side, clapped her hands. Chen Yuanyuan was so angry that she almost fainted. "Have you thought about it? Do you want me to save you or not?" Song Qingshu said coldly. "Save?" Chen Yuanyuan bit her lips and said reluctantly. "Tsk, you should have done this earlier. You just have to refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit." Li Yuanji curled her lips in disdain. Then, she ran to the door to keep watch for the two of them. Song Qingshu helped Chen Yuanyuan sit up and said softly, "Next, I'll use the solitary yang finger to open up your 8 extraordinary meridians and pull you back from the gates of hell. During this time, relax your whole body and don't have any thoughts of resisting." "Thank you," Chen Yuanyuan hesitated, but finally nodded slightly. She was a very smart woman. She now understood that the reason why he had acted so fierce just now was because he wanted to treat her. With the experience of treating Xiao Long Nu and Lu Wushuang's leg, Song Qingshu was now very familiar with the solitary yang finger. As for the drawback of using the solitary yang finger, he had already solved the problem of losing a lot of true qi. Back when Reverend Yiding used the solitary yang finger to treat someone, his true qi was greatly reduced. It would take him 5 years to get it back. In the end, it was because his cultivation level was not high enough. If someone who didn't know the truth heard a young man say that South Deity, one of the 5 uniques, was not high enough, they would have scoffed. At first, Song Qingshu didn't believe it. But after he used the solitary yang finger to save someone, he realized that the loss was not as terrible as the rumors said. At the same time, he remembered that after Reverend Yiding obtained the 9 Sutra, the 5 years he needed was instantly shortened to less than 3 months. Song Qingshu finally understood what was going on. Not only did he practice the 9 Sutra, but he also practiced the Scripture of Divine Reflection, the Blissful Zen, the Sutra of Supreme Mystery, and so on. None of them were weaker than the 9 Sutra. His martial arts had long surpassed Reverend Yiding's. That was why after he used the solitary yang finger to save someone, he didn't lose much of his true qi. At most, he felt physically tired, but he could recover after a good rest. Collecting his thoughts, Song Qingshu put his left hand on his chest and stretched out his right index finger. He slowly touched the Bai Hui acupoint on the top of Chen Yuanyuan's head. After the first touch, he immediately retracted his finger. His body didn't move, but his second finger touched the Ho acupoint, which was 1.5 inches behind the Bai Hui acupoint. Next, he touched the Qiangjian, Naohu Fengfu, Dazhui, Tao Dao, Shen Zhu, Ling Tai, and Ling Tai. Song Qingshu's heart skipped a beat when he thought of this delicate body that could make all the men in the world go crazy for. In fact, it wasn't just Song Qingshu who felt this way. Chen Yuanyuan also felt her soul tremble, and her body couldn't help but tremble. Chapter 1272. It must be known that in the Wuling world, except for father and daughter, mother and son, husband and wife, the male teacher would not teach the female disciple, and the female teacher would not teach the male disciple. As the saying goes, men and women should not touch each other. If the acupoints on the body were not touched one by one, how could one learn this martial art? Although Song Qingshu was treating his injury, it was similar to teaching acupoint sealing martial art. One must know that in the past, the old urchin, who was ignorant of worldly affairs, taught Ngu acupoint sealing martial art. In the end, he taught Ngu to roll in the sheet. Song Qingshu was not the old urchin. Nowadays he was very self-controlled. His willpower was far superior to ordinary people, but Chen Yuanyuan's willpower was not even as good as Ngu's. All along Chen Yuanyuan had a secret that she had never told anyone. It was that as soon as a man touched her body, she would feel weak all over, her body would become softer than cotton. Because of her sensitive body, ambitious and ruthless people like Li Zicheng and Wu Sangue could not stop themselves from having sex with her. Now every time Song Qingshu touched an acupoint on her body, a stream of hot air would enter her body, making her feel warm and comfortable, so much so that she almost moaned. But in the end, her reason prevailed. She bit her lips, afraid that she would make any sound that would embarrass her. Song Qingshu was concentrating on treating her injury, and coincidentally Chen Yuanyuan's back was facing him, so he did not notice anything unusual. After opening the 36 acupoints of her governing vessel, Song Qingshu stretched out his hand to hold her fragrant shoulder and gently turned her around. Seeing that her red lips were slightly bitten, Song Qingshu was startled. "Are you feeling very uncomfortable?" Chen Yuanyuan was startled. She quickly shook her head and said with a guilty conscience, "No." Song Qingshu then said, "Next, I am going to open the 25 acupoints of your governing vessel." Chen Yuanyuan was not a Jianghu person, she was not clear about the distribution of acupoints, plus she was a bit guilty, afraid that the other party would see through her mind. She quickly grunted to indicate that she was ready. Song Qingshu originally wanted to remind her that many acupoints in the Run Meridian were a bit sensitive, but on second thought, Chen Yuanyuan had experienced so many things, and this degree of touch should be nothing, so he didn't say anything. However, this made Chen Yuanyuan suffer. At first, the Qingshu, Lianchuan, and Tiantu acupoints were fine, but then Song Qingshu's fingers touched the area between her breasts. She instantly widened her eyes. This place is also an acupoint?" Song Qingshu nodded. As he pressed her acupoints, he explained to her, "This is Zigong, this is Yutong, this is Shanzhong." She took a closer look at Song Qingshu's eyes and found that they were very clear. She knew that she had misunderstood him. The two of them had never been so close to each other before. Chen Yuanyuan suddenly realized that the man in front of her was like a meticulously carved statue. Every line of his was so handsome and masculine. Chen Yuanyuan didn't know what she was thinking, but her face instantly turned red. She hurriedly turned her head to the other side, and only then did she calm down a little. "What's wrong with me? He's so much younger than me." Chen Yuanyuan's thoughts were quickly interrupted because Song Qingshu's fingers had already touched her lower abdomen. A ball of warmth rose from her lower abdomen. Chen Yuanyuan clenched her fists tightly, and her face became even redder. After sealing the Qihai, Shermen, and other acupoints, Song Qingshu suddenly felt embarrassed. He hesitated for a moment and said to Chen Yuanyuan, "Madam, I need to untie your dress next." "What?" Chen Yuanyuan seemed to be unable to believe her ears. She flatly refused. "No." Song Qingshu had to explain, "There are still a few acupoints below your navel, and these acupoints are very important. A slight deviation will not only not save you, but will also speed up the process of pushing you to the gates of hell." But Chen Yuanyuan was embarrassed and anxious. What a scandal! Seeing that she was using all sorts of excuses, Song Qingshu knew that this couldn't go on like this. He could only say, "In fact, Madam doesn't need to care about it. In any case, I've seen what I shouldn't have seen that night. Do you want to be seen by me alone, or do you want to be hung at the palace gate for all the men in the world to see?" Chen Yuanyuan hatefully glared at him. "You obviously have good intentions. Why do you always speak so vulgar? Song Qingshu shrugged. "If I don't do this, how will you give in?" Chen Yuanyuan bit her lip. "I don't believe that you will really do that." Song Qingshu looked back at her. "You can bet once." The two looked at each other for a long time. Chen Yuanyuan finally couldn't help but look away. She lightly snorted, "Fine, you win." Song Qingshu smiled slightly. "Do you want to take it off yourself, or should I?" Hearing his words, Chen Yuanyuan's face blushed again. Her breath became a little flustered. I'll do it myself." Then she hesitantly moved her hand to her waist. Song Qingshu waited for a long time. Seeing that her hand was still on her belt, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. "Let me do it." He leaned over and without saying anything, he quickly untied her dress, revealing her flat and charming belly. Chen Yuanyuan was embarrassed and anxious. However, when Song Qingshu's finger touched the Guanyuan acupoint 3 inches below her navel, the numbing feeling made her quickly shut her mouth. She was afraid that she couldn't help but make some embarrassing sound at this time. "Looking at your skilled appearance just now, you must have untied a lot of girls' dresses," Chen Yuanyuan said sarcastically after coming back to her senses. It must be known that the belt of women in this world was a bit complicated. If it wasn't untied properly, it could easily become a dead knot. "Is Madam jealous?" The corner of Song Qingshu's mouth hung a faint smile. "Pay!" Chen Yuanyuan hurriedly turned her face away. Her heart was beating rapidly. She secretly told herself that talking to him was a mistake. Originally, she had decided not to talk to him anymore. However, as Song Qingshu's hand kept moving downwards, she finally couldn't sit still. Where are you putting your hand?" Song Qingshu replied with a normal expression. The Ren meridian is also known as the Yin meridian sea, and the Huyin acupoint can be called the sea in the sea. It is the most important acupoint of the Ren meridian. It was no wonder that Chen Yuanyuan couldn't sit still. The Huyin acupoint was the most central position of a woman's 2 most sensitive parts. "Can you not touch there?" Chen Yuanyuan's voice faintly sounded like she was about to cry. Song Qingshu shook his head. "If you don't open the Huyin acupoint, all the acupoints in the Ren meridian will be in vain." Hearing the unquestionable tone in his voice, Chen Yuanyuan turned her head. "Then, hurry up." Song Qingshu smiled bitterly, and could only use the solitary yang finger to touch her. Chen Yuanyuan's body was already many times more sensitive than ordinary women. She had already gritted her teeth and endured bitterly. Now that such a private place was touched by a man, she felt her scalp go numb. It was as if an electric current had passed through her entire body, and she couldn't help but moan. "What's wrong?" Li Yuanji, who was at the door, knew that she had an important responsibility, so she had been carefully observing the movements outside. She didn't dare to be careless, but when she heard Chen Yuanyuan's voice, she subconsciously turned her head. "Nothing." Chen Yuanyuan and Song Qingshu seemed to have a telepathic connection as they replied in unison. Is that so? From her angle, she couldn't see anything unusual. Li Yuanji turned her head suspiciously, and secretly snorted in her heart. A vixen is a vixen. Even a random snort is so coquettish. At just hearing it gives me goosebumps. Chapter 1273. Seeing that Li Yuanji was no longer looking at them, Chen Yuanyuan blushed and whispered to Song Qingshu, "Don't tell anyone about what happened today." A strange smile appeared on Song Qingshu's face. Not even Aku? No. Chen Yuanyuan suddenly became anxious. Seeing her inadvertently revealing the expression of a young girl when she was anxious, Song Qingshu smiled. Since you don't want me to say it, then I won't say it. Feeling the inexplicable meaning in his words, Chen Yuanyuan's heart jumped. She hurriedly lowered her head, not daring to look at his eyes, but this way, the feeling in her body was magnified several times. As if being stabbed there by a red-hot iron, Chen Yuanyuan's voice began to tremble. How long until it's done? Almost done. Song Qingshu used his true qi to carefully rush towards her huine acupoint. Because Chen Yuanyuan was not a martial artist and her acupoint had not been opened, he did not dare to take risk. He carefully controlled the strength of his true qi, so it took a little longer than expected. But this made Chen Yuanyuan's body extremely sensitive, and with his true qi constantly attacking her, her whole body soon became stiff. Song Qingshu was carefully controlling his true qi, who knew that Chen Yuanyuan's pair of round and tight thighs would suddenly clamp his hand tightly, close to her, and her whole body would fall into his embrace, fiercely biting his shoulder. Hiss! Song Qingshu sucked in a breath of cold air, thinking that this woman really had the heart to bite him. He only poked her a few times. Did she have to bite him so fiercely? In the end, his tenderness for the fairer sex came out, and he did not use his internal force to shake her off, so he could only let her bite him. "Brother Song, there are guards coming this way," Li Yuanji suddenly exclaimed from the door. Hearing this, Chen Yuanyuan's body trembled even more, and her legs clamped even tighter. Then, Song Qingshu felt a large amount of something slippery in his hand. Song Qingshu never thought that Chen Yuanyuan's body would be so sensitive. At this time, Chen Yuanyuan's whole body was trembling, and she buried her head in his chest, not daring to raise it. Brother Song, Li Yuanji ran over in a panic. Song Qingshu quietly pulled the blanket over Chen Yuanyuan to prevent Li Yuanji from seeing this embarrassing scene. Then, he asked with his usual expression, "How many people came?" "Seems a lot," Li Yuanji thought and said. "They seem to be searching from house to house." Song Qingshu nodded. "It should be because of the commotion I caused just now, so the Imperial Guards are investigating." "Has her injury been cured?" Li Yuanji stretched out her head to look at Chen Yuanyuan, but because Chen Yuanyuan's back was facing her, she couldn't see anything clearly. Yuanji said. "Li Chen Wang Yuanyuan, Li Wang Li Chen Chen Li Yuan." "Li Yang Yuanji Jigo, Li Yang Li, how about we hide somewhere?" Li Yuanji said anxiously. The sounds of searching outside were getting closer. "No." Song Qingshu shook his head. "Once the one yang finger is interrupted, it will cause the injured person's meridians to reverse flow. At that time, even the almighty immortals can't save her." "Then what should we do?" Li Yuanji stamped her feet and was about to cry. "Come under the covers and pretend to rest." Song Qingshu seemed to have a card up his sleeve, and his tone was unhurried. Li Yuanji's eyes brightened. She instantly understood his plan and jumped onto the bed. Just as she was about to crawl under the covers, she heard Song Qingshu say, "Take off your coat." Li Yuanji didn't react for a moment. The Imperial Guards are not fools. If you hide under the covers with your clothes on, anyone will know it's a trap, Song Qingshu explained. "Oh." Li Yuanji nodded and quickly took off her coat. In any case, Song Qingshu was her lover. The two of them were already intimate, so she didn't mind taking off her clothes in front of him. Go in a bit. It's too easy to be seen through. After crawling under the covers, Li Yuanji felt that Chen Yuanyuan was too close to her and subconsciously pushed her. Chen Yuanyuan was caught off guard and her whole body twisted. Suddenly, her eyes widened and she let out a sweet moan from her throat. Li Yuanji frowned and secretly curled her lip. She thought to herself, I just pushed you. Did you need to make such a sound? No wonder those men call you a femme fatale. Song Qingshu was also dumbfounded. It turned out that his finger had just pressed against Chen Yuanyuan's huine acupoint and was about to withdraw his finger when Chen Yuanyuan's body twisted. In addition to the fact that his hand was slippery to begin with, his finger slipped and stabbed into Chen Yuanyuan's body. Song Qingshu wanted to explain, but he didn't know how to explain this situation. Chen Yuanyuan was about to cry. Previously, when this man pressed her acupuncture point, her body became extremely sensitive. She thought it was embarrassing enough. Now, she had been cultivating with the Buddha's lamp all these years and kept her chastity like jade. She didn't expect that her many years of perseverance would be broken so dramatically. Chen Yuanyuan opened her mouth and suddenly realized that she didn't know how to blame this man. He was just treating her out of kindness. What's more, it was her leg that clamped his hand so tightly that he couldn't withdraw it. Later, it was her sudden movement that led to this. The more Chen Yuanyuan thought about it, the redder her face became. In the end, she almost cried. She thought to herself, does he think that I'm deliberately seducing him? Song Qingshu coughed lightly and broke the awkwardness between the two. I'll help you open your linking meridian now. Chen Yuanyuan's voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. Hearing that the other party didn't mention this matter, she knew that he was deliberately avoiding her embarrassment. She felt embarrassed and grateful in her heart. The linking meridian starts from the inside of the thigh and goes up along the inside of the thigh to the abdomen, coincides with the tying meridian of the foot, passes through the chest, and meets with the run meridian at the neck. Song Qingshu felt that it was necessary to give her a heads-up in advance so that she wouldn't be caught off guard and startled again. Chen Yuanyuan answered vaguely. She thought to herself, I've already experienced the most embarrassing thing. Can this be even more embarrassing? Soon, she felt a pair of hands caressing the inside of her thigh. This time, Chen Yuanyuan didn't think too much. She knew that the two of them were hiding under the blanket, and that he might not be able to see her acupuncture point clearly. She was trying to find the location of the acupuncture point. However, rationality was one thing and the body's reaction was another. Chen Yuanyuan was the kind of person who would go limp the moment a man touched her. Moreover, she had been celibate for a long time and hadn't been touched by a man for many years. Now that a handsome and tall man was hugging her and caressing the most sensitive parts of her body, her beautiful eyes gradually became misty. It was as if water was about to seep out. Chen Yuanyuan, how can you be so shameless? You're so much older than him, and the relationship between your daughter and him is not ordinary. Chen Yuanyuan bit her red lips and began to recite the Buddhist scriptures that she had been cultivating for the past few years in an attempt to calm her fiery heart. What made her rejoice was that Song Qingshu finally found the acupuncture point. His fingers gradually moved up to her abdomen. Chen Yuanyuan had just heaved a sigh of relief when she suddenly realized that something was wrong. Her pair of peach blossom eyes instantly widened. This was because she finally realized that Song Qingshu was currently using his other hand to treat her injuries. The hand that he had used just now was still in the distance and hadn't been taken out. Chapter 1274. Chen Yuanyuan was suddenly confused, and all kinds of thoughts came to her mind. Why didn't he take it out? Did he forget? Or is he worried that I will be embarrassed? But this will make me even more embarrassed. While Chen Yuanyuan was struggling, there was suddenly a knock on the door. "Open the door! Open the door!" She couldn't help but be shocked, and immediately pricked up her ears to listen. "Who is it?" Song Qingshu couldn't help but admire Li Yuanji's natural talent in acting. Her lazy and slightly impatient tone made her sound like someone who had been woken up in the middle of a nap. It was practically imitated to perfection. "We are the Imperial Guards. There are assassins in the palace, so we need to search every corner," the guard outside replied. "But I am already asleep," Li Yuanji replied with some dissatisfaction. "Stop talking nonsense, we need to search every place. If you don't open the door, we will break in directly." The guards outside became impatient. If it was a normal concubine, they naturally wouldn't dare to be so rash. But everyone knew that the women in the cold palace were doomed, so who cared so much? Sensing the tension of the beauty in his arms, Song Qingshu whispered in her ear, "Don't be afraid, I am here." Chen Yuanyuan thought that if a large group of guards saw her like this, she really wouldn't want to live anymore. Hearing the knocking on the door getting more and more urgent, Li Yuanji had to say, "The door is not closed, come in yourself." Because she had to take off her coat and hide in the bed, it was naturally inconvenient for her to get up and open the door, so she opened the door just now. Bang! The door was suddenly pushed open, and a large group of guards rushed in. Seeing Li Yuanji on the bed, the leader of the guards looked suspicious. "You don't close the door when you sleep?" Li Yuanji was shocked, but she reacted quickly enough and replied calmly, "No one usually comes to this cold palace, so what difference does it make whether the door is closed or not?" Chen Yuanyuan, who was hiding under the quilt, also secretly admired Li Yuanji. At this time, Li Yuanji's tone was exactly the same as those disheartened concubines in the cold palace. No wonder her heaven-defying acting skills could deceive her and Aku. Hearing Li Yuanji's explanation, the guard leader frowned but didn't say anything. He waved his hand and signaled his subordinates to search the room. A group of guards rummaged through the room for a while, and some even flew to the roof to look at the hidden beams. "We didn't find anything." Soon, a group of people came back to report. The leader of the guards did not comment and shifted his gaze in the direction of the bed. Hearing the footsteps getting closer and closer to the bed, Chen Yuanyuan's heart jumped to her throat. Thinking of the consequences of being discovered, she nervously closed her eyes. "What are you going to do?" Even the fearless Li Yuanji began to panic. The leader of the guards did not answer. Instead, he pulled out his saber and lifted the bed curtain. He then bent down to check under the bed. Seeing that he was only checking under the bed, Li Yuanji secretly heaved a sigh of relief. The leader of the guards stood up, and his next words made Li Yuanji's heart jump again. "You seem very nervous?" "It would be strange if I wasn't nervous when so many of you came in." Li Yuanji rolled her eyes and hurriedly said, "Are you done checking? If you're done, quickly go out and remember to close the door." The leader of the guards shook his head. "There's still one place that hasn't been checked." Li Yuanji's heart skipped a beat. She suppressed her panic and asked, "Where?" The leader of the guards pouted and his eyes fell on the swollen quilt. "Lift the quilt. I want to check inside." Chen Yuanyuan had always lived like a princess. She was not as mentally strong as Li Yuanji. Hearing that he wanted to check the quilt, she was shocked and subconsciously screamed. However, Song Qingshu reacted quickly. He instantly kissed her and blocked her scream in her throat. Chen Yuanyuan's mind went blank. She was actually kissed by this man? She subconsciously resisted because of her woman's modesty. However, as soon as she moved, she felt that the man's fingers were as hard as iron. Her vital parts were pressed against, and she instantly lost her strength. "If you want to kill us, go ahead and move." Chen Yuanyuan only calmed down when she heard Song Qingshu's telepathic message. Only then did she realize that Song Qingshu had only kissed her to silence her cry of surprise. This bastard, why did he have to do it there? Although she couldn't see in the darkness, Chen Yuan knew that her cheeks must be crimson. Now she was in the arms of the man next to her. With the current position of the two of them, she could be said to have presented her body in front of him without reservation. Chen Yuan was a little dazed for a moment. What was wrong with her? Why couldn't she be angry at all? Instead, the biggest feeling she felt was that her heart was pounding. Suddenly, Chen Yuan's eyes widened. She was ashamed and angry. It's fine if you sealed my mouth to prevent me from speaking, but did you have to stick your tongue in? She wanted to close her teeth and bite him, but after trying a few times, she couldn't steel her heart in the end. This person is really the devil in my life. Chen Yuan faintly sighed and simply closed her eyes. Her pair of jade arms instinctively hooked around the neck of the man beside her. Unlike the charming and gentle atmosphere under the blanket, the atmosphere outside was much more tense. Li Yuanji gripped the blanket tightly and stared coldly at the leader of the guards. Although I've been banished to the cold palace, I'm still an imperial concubine in the palace. I'm the emperor's woman. You dare to be rude to me? The leader of the guards replied indifferently, This subordinate doesn't dare. This subordinate is just dutifully searching for the assassin. Li Yuanji said angrily, I'm not wearing clothes right now. Do you want to see too? The leader of the guards chuckled. Don't joke around. Miss is clearly still wearing clothes. Only then did Li Yuanji realize that her body was slightly exposed, allowing him to see that she was wearing clothes. She also understood that she was only a woman in the cold palace. If she was a proper imperial concubine, the other party would never dare to question her like this. Miss is making excuses. Could it be that there really is an assassin hiding under the blanket? The leader of the guards waved his hand and more guards gathered around. What should I do? Brother Song, what should I do? Li Yuanji was very confident in Song Qingshu's martial arts, but now he was at the critical moment of healing Chen Yuan. She was worried that he would be disturbed and go berserk. At this time, not only Li Yuanji was worried, Chen Yuan's heart was also in her throat. She hurriedly pushed the man next to her, who knew that Song Qingshu did not react at all and continued to greedily kiss her. Chen Yuan was secretly disappointed. She thought that he would be different, but who knew that he was also the kind of man who would ignore everything when he saw her beauty. Her fiery heart gradually cooled down. If you don't open the blanket, I'll do it. Li Yuanji made excuses. The leader of the guards became even more suspicious. Seeing that she was indifferent, he coldly snorted and used the tip of his knife to pick up a corner of the blanket and suddenly pulled it open. Chapter 1275. Ah! Li Yuanji screamed. She was not afraid that her body would be seen. After all, although she had taken off her coat, she was still wearing clothes. She was afraid that Song Qingshu and Chen Yuan would be discovered. She was thinking about accompanying her lover to fight their way out of the palace, but the scene she imagined did not appear. Seeing that the group of guards seemed to be stunned, Li Yuanji subconsciously curled her lips and thought to herself, Chen Yuan is indeed a natural seductress. Any man would be charmed by her. However, she soon realized that something was wrong. No matter how charming Chen Yuan was, there was still Song Qingshu next to her. The palace guards would not turn a blind eye to them. She hurriedly turned her head and was immediately stunned. The two people who were just next to her had disappeared. Only the slightly messy bedsheet told her that two people had just been lying here. She rubbed her eyes in disbelief. At that moment, Li Yuanji was even a little dazed. Could it be that everything that happened during this period of time was just her wishful thinking? Silly girl, what are you waiting for? Why don't you take the opportunity to send these people away? Suddenly, she heard the familiar voice of Song Qingshu. Li Yuanji's worry turned to joy in an instant. She knew it was Song Qingshu who had secretly transmitted his voice to her. She reacted quickly and instantly pulled the quilt back to cover herself. She glared at the guard leader and said, Are you satisfied now? Hurry up and get out. Her tone perfectly described the anger of a young girl after being offended. The leader of the guard's face turned gloomy. However, he was in the wrong first, so he could only coldly snort and beckon to his subordinates. Let's go. Seeing a group of people file out, Li Yuanji slightly raised the corner of her mouth and said, "Close the door." In response to her was the sound of the door being slammed. After putting on her clothes, Li Yuanji quickly jumped out of bed and ran to the door to look for a while. After making sure that the guards were far away, she then came back and looked around. "Brother Song, where are you?" "I'm here." Hearing the voice coming from the bed, Li Yuanji ran over with a look of disbelief and found that he and Chen Yuanyuan were still in the same place. "How is this possible?" Li Yuanji subconsciously murmured. Just now, she clearly saw that there was no one beside her. How did two living people suddenly appear out of thin air? Look at this and you'll understand. Song Qingshu lifted the bedsheet and revealed the bed board underneath. Li Yuanji poked her head out to take a look and found a human-shaped hole in the bed. Her jaw dropped. "What's going on?" Song Qingshu smiled and gave her a rough explanation. As it turned out, at that critical moment, Song Qingshu did not lose himself in Chen Yuanyuan's beauty. Instead, he secretly used his jinqi to cut a human-shaped hole in the bedboard. Then he carried Chen Yuanyuan and hid under the bed through that hole. After that, he put the wooden board back into the hole and used the dragon capturing art to control the bedsheet to return to its original state. After doing all this, the guard lifted the quilt. Naturally, nothing unusual could be seen. As for the bottom of the bed, that person had already checked it himself. Naturally, he wouldn't have thought that someone would be hiding there. The whole process sounded simple, but in Jianghu there were very few people who could do this. First of all, one's jinqi must be profound enough to silently cut the bedboard. Carrying a person and falling with the bedboard to the ground without making a sound, one must have perfect control over their jinqi. Then, one must also have the ability to take things through the air like the dragon capturing art. "Brother Song, you're too amazing." Li Yuanji's face was full of worship. She happily leaned over and kissed him. "Hey Brother Song, why do I smell rouge on your face?" Li Yuanji wiped her lips. Her words made Chen Yuanyuan blush instantly. Song Qingshu coughed twice. "Quickly go to the door and continue to stand guard. Don't let those guards come back and attack us." "Okay." Li Yuanji was, after all, a young girl. Her attention was easily diverted. She skipped to the door and stood guard. After Li Yuanji left, Song Qingshu lowered his head and said to Chen Yuanyuan, "Let's continue." And, just now, when she saw that she was about to be exposed, her heart was in her throat. Then, the danger was averted. The whole process was like a roller coaster. That intense stimulation reached the critical point when the quilt was lifted. Chen Yuanyuan's legs were tightly clamped around Song Qingshu's hand. Her delicate body couldn't help but tremble. Even now, her whole body was still weak. Song Qingshu used the one yang finger and opened up the remaining acupoints of her yin linking meridian. "Turn over. I'm going to open up the acupoints of your yang linking meridian." At this moment, Chen Yuanyuan's body was delicate and soft. It was even softer than cotton. Moreover, because her acupoints were opened up, her clothes were soaked in sweat. Her clothes were tightly stuck to her skin, vividly outlining her graceful and perfect figure. The tip of his nose was filled with a sweet fragrance that was like orchid and musk. Song Qingshu's heart couldn't help but sway. Can you take your hand out?" At this moment, Chen Yuanyuan's voice was slightly hoarse. However, compared to her usual dignified self, it was a bit more sexy. "Okay." Song Qingshu also felt that he was being a bit unkind. Just now, he had been pretending to be deaf and mute, pretending to have forgotten about this matter. Now that someone had taken the initiative to bring it up, he couldn't do that again. "You have to loosen your legs first," Song Qingshu said with a bitter smile. Chen Yuan's charming oval-shaped face suddenly turned red. It turned out that just now, her body's sensitivity had reached a critical point, and she had subconsciously clamped her legs together. She didn't know if Song Qinshu was afraid of hurting her or something else. His movements were very slow on purpose. This made Chen Yuan suffer. She felt as if her entire soul was trembling because of his fingers. Seeing that she was about to succeed and retreat, Chen Yuan secretly heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, there was a sense of loss and emptiness in her heart. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. At this moment, Song Qinshu also didn't feel good. Chen Yuan's soul was trembling, and so was he. He only felt that his mouth was dry, and his brain suddenly heated up. Chen Yuan's eyes instantly widened, and her voice began to tremble. Why did you? The Huin acupoint is the sea of Yin meridians, the ancestor of the 100 meridians. At the same time, infusing true qi here can double the results with half the effort in healing. Song Qinshu seriously began to talk nonsense. But isn't the Huin acupoint at the back? Chen Yuan couldn't help but want to clamp her legs together again. Ahem. Song Qinshu's old face turned red. This is the small Huin acupoint, a hidden acupoint in the human body. Oh, Chen Yuan nodded her head, not fully understanding. In fact, she also knew that the other party was lying to her, but right now both sides needed a reason to continue like this, even if this reason couldn't stand up to scrutiny. Song Qinshu held his breath and concentrated, continuing to use the one yang finger to help her open up the remaining acupoints. Of course, occasionally he couldn't help but use his other finger to display the one yang finger to explore the peerless beauty in his arms. 2 to 4 hours later, the treatment was finally completed. Chen Yuan felt as if her whole body was fished out of hot water. She didn't want to move even half a finger. Li Yuanji stared strangely at her peach blossom-like cheeks. Her watery eyes suspiciously asked, "Did you two do something behind my back?" "No," Chen Yuan and Song Qinshu said in unison. After speaking, they looked at each other and tacitly decided to treat what just happened as a secret only the two of them knew. Chapter 1276. Seeing that Chen Yuan was so tired that she could barely open her eyes, Song Qinshu said to her, "You just recovered from your internal injury. You need to rest for a while. Besides, I don't know why Huang Chang wants to kill you. Stay here and recover for the time being." And Chen Yuan looked at him tenderly. She should hate this man, but she didn't know why, but she couldn't bring up the slightest bit of hatred in her heart. Instead, it was replaced with incomparable embarrassment. I don't know how many girls he has hurt to get the ability to make people live and die. Thinking of his evil fingers, Chen Yuan's cheeks were burning. She secretly spat. To think that I thought he really loved and cared for me. I didn't expect him to be no different from other men. He's just as lustful. But soon she shook her head and sighed, "It's all because I'm too sensitive." No wonder he couldn't control himself in that situation. Thinking of the scene where she hugged him tightly with her legs trembling, Chen Yuan wished there was a hole in the ground to hide in. She had been cultivating hard all these years, but she didn't have the strength to control herself. After all, he doesn't just want to sleep with me like other men. Recalling the tenderness of his fingers, Chen Yuan couldn't help but feel a little dazed. Coupled with the physical exhaustion, she soon fell asleep. Li Yuanji pulled Song Qinshu aside and pouted at Chen Yuan, who was on the bed. She whispered, "Is this woman sick? One moment she's crying, and the next moment she's laughing for no reason." "Ahem," Song Qinshu answered guiltily, "she has just recovered from her serious injury. It's normal for her to see some illusions." "Oh." Li Yuanji nodded as if she understood. Then she curled her lips and said, "I don't want to be with this woman." Song Qinshu said with a wry smile, "But now I'm too big a target in Lin and City. All the forces are watching me. If I take her out of the palace, I'll be easily discovered. Li Yuanji pouted and said, Do you have to take her with you? Can't you just send her back? Song Qingshu said in surprise, Her identity is special and can be considered a rare commodity. How can such a person be casually let go? I haven't figured out how to maximize the benefits, so I'll leave her here for you to look after. As the saying goes, the most dangerous place is the safest place. No one will think that she's still hiding in the palace. Is it really not because she's beautiful? Li Yuanji asked suspiciously. Of course not. When Song Qingshu answered, he felt a little guilty and hurriedly changed the topic. Leaving her here is equivalent to having a protective talisman for you. The reason why I entered the palace this time was because I was worried about the eunuch who gave you the poisoned wine that night. I was afraid that the same thing would happen again. Now that you have Chun Yuan, you can use her as a protective talisman in times of danger. She can also buy enough time for me to save you. Oh, all right then. Li Yuanji reluctantly agreed. I'll have to trouble you to take care of her during this time. Song Qingshu looked at the sky outside and saw that it was getting late. Sister Yuanji, Zhao Guo will host a banquet for me in the palace today. I have to go back to the inn and wait. Otherwise, if they can't find me and connect me to the assassin in the palace, it will be bad. Brother Song, be careful. Li Yuanji helped him straighten his clothes and then reluctantly bid him farewell. Song Qingshu quietly left the palace. When he returned to the inn, the people from the office of the Herald of Dependencies were indeed looking for him everywhere. When they saw him, they all cried out, Oh my God, where did you run off to? The banquet is about to start and we've been looking for you everywhere. Song Qingshu shrugged nonchalantly. It hasn't started yet, has it? The official from the office of the Herald of Dependencies almost fainted. It hasn't started, but we have to go there and wait. Are we supposed to let the emperor sit there and wait for us? Seeing that he was going to continue, Song Qingshu hurriedly cut him off. All right, I'm back now. Wait for me to change my clothes, then I'll leave. Finishing, he went back into his room and closed the door. The reason why he wanted to change his clothes was because, first, he had just had intimate contact with Chun Yuan. His body was filled with her scent, and he was worried that he would give himself away. Second, he had met Huang Chang in the palace before. Although he was wearing a mask, Huang Chang would definitely recognize his clothes. Song Qingshu had always been careful, and naturally would not give himself away on this matter. He crumpled the clothes he had taken off into a ball and used his pure yang inner strength to rub it. The clothes instantly turned to dust. Only then did Song Qingshu go out and call the official from the office of the Herald of Dependencies to enter the palace with him. He could clearly feel that there were many more imperial guards in the palace than during the day. Song Qingshu knew that it was because of the scene he had caused in the afternoon, but he didn't think much of it. He continued to follow the official from the office of the Herald of Dependencies to the palace where the banquet was held. After walking for a short while, his heart suddenly jumped. He saw a woman wearing a light yellow robe walking towards him from afar. She was about 27 or 28 years old, graceful and beautiful. However, her face was too pale, without the slightest hint of blood. When the official from the office of the Herald of Dependencies saw her, his eyes lit up and he hurriedly came forward to greet her. The yellow-robed woman casually waved her hand, indicating that there was no need for formalities. You may leave. I will bring Prince Song to the banquet. Her voice was cold and distant, but it was still pleasant to the ears. The official hesitated for a moment, then finally nodded his head and bowed. After the official had gone far away, Song Qingshu smiled. It seems that you have quite a bit of face. Should I call you Miss Yang or Miss Zhao? The woman in front of him was naturally the yellow-robed woman that he had not seen for a long time. My face has always been very big. Only you don't take me seriously. The yellow-robed woman rolled her eyes at him. The two of them had been together for a long time in the palace of the Jin kingdom and were already familiar with each other's temperament. As for whether it is Miss Yang or Miss Zhao, I remember telling you before. Song Qinshu shrugged. I am a very busy person and have many things to do. How can I remember everything? The yellow-robed woman's face was originally calm, but his words made her teeth itch. However, she quickly realized something and smiled. You are still the same. You haven't changed at all. I have changed a lot. I almost died some time ago. When I was at my wit's end, you didn't help me. It seems that you are not a good friend. Song Qinshu curled his lips and said lightly. The yellow-robed woman immediately looked apologetic. I am sorry. I happened to be in the western region for some business at that time. When I found out about your accident, it was already a long time later. If the scholars of the southern Song dynasty saw this scene, their jaws would probably drop. The holy maiden of the academy, who had always been harsh to everyone, was actually begging a young man in such a soft tone. Song Qinshu smiled faintly and did not comment on this. The yellow-robed woman stomped her feet and chased after him. She said angrily, I originally came here to denounce you. I didn't expect you to beat me to it. Song Qinshu was stunned. Denounce me for what? The yellow-robed woman snorted. Someone said that he wanted to marry the two princesses of the great Song to be his concubines. What a big tone. So you are fighting for your sister. Song Qinshu suddenly smiled. But before you do that, can you first repay the debt you owe me? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.